Chapter 1904. Come to think of it, I actually have a vested interest. More than 10 years ago, you brought me Nesario in advance as my collection in the caverns of time. Now, you've indirectly extended my life. If it's just a boring continuation, then eternal life is just a kind of torture. But you let me see a future full of changes, and that's what I'm most happy about. The elf-shaped Nosdormu touched his chest. Only an unknown future can make me feel that my heartbeat isn't fake. I'm a real life, and not a slave that keeps repeating the future and locking history. I'm happy that you're happy, Xueqi replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. Since you made Onyxia a dragon aspect, indirectly allowing me to preserve enough power to continue protecting this timeline, then I'll give it to you. As a reward for changing the future, I can tell you why you can't become a god with the elements. What? Xueqi was shocked. This time, Xueqi was really surprised. From becoming a demigod to standing at the peak of the demigod realm, and indirectly or directly controlling the three elemental realms, Xueqi still did not understand the true path. Regarding the process of history, Xueqi knew like the back of his hand. However, regarding the path to becoming stronger, Xueqi could be said to be completely clueless. It was as if God had covered a piece of plastic wrap in front of him and forgot to remove it. It became more and more hazy and confused. At this moment, Nosdormu suddenly jumped out and told him that he knew the reason. It would be strange if Xueqi was not ecstatic. If Nosdormu was not a male dragon, Xueqi would have rushed up and kissed him a few times. Xueqi suppressed his excitement and secretly clenched his fists as he listened to Nosdormu's words. Nosdormu did not play any pranks to keep him in suspense. He was not that kind of dragon, so he directly revealed the mystery. Because even if you control all the water and fire elements in this world, you only have 1% of the true reserves of Azeroth. It's a miracle that you can become a demigod with so few elements. Ah! Xueqi was shocked. The next second, he suddenly realized what Nosdorm meant. Nosdormu was the king of time, so he naturally controlled the mysteries of time. Of course, he wasn't talking about the Azeroth. After Xueqi had mastered the water and fire realms, he had begun to connect the water and fire elements of the entire planet. It was only a matter of time before he could master all the elements. Nosdorm was obviously talking about something else. In the original history, after the brainless Howl was overthrown, he was not executed. Instead, he left behind a scourge. He was secretly released, and with the help of the traitor of the Bronze Dragon, he escaped to another rather important timeline. In that timeline, Brainless Roar returned to the first orc who drank the devil's blood, which was his father, Grandpa Roar. Because he was familiar with his father, he easily gained Master Howl's trust and directly changed the course of history. Brainless Roar used the black technology that he had obtained from the goblins in the original world to directly change the history of the orcs. Finally, at the time of the King of Draenor, he reconnected the branch timelines to the world of the main timeline. Through the dark portal, he killed millions of orcs with black technology, and almost completed the great cause of overthrowing the Alliance and Horde in the main timeline. With this memory and Nosdorm's reminder, Xueqi understood. Xueqi was shocked. You mean the water, fire, and arcane elements in the other timelines? Isn't this the main timeline? The main timeline should have the largest share of elements, right? Nosdorm laughed. The largest? That's right. At this point in time, there are a total of more than 108,000 branch timelines. One main timeline can have 1%. What else do you want? Xueqi's face turned green. Could it be that after working hard for more than 20 years, he had only changed 1% of this world? Nosdormu stopped his train of thought before he could even think about it. Don't think too much. The world has accepted your changes in the main timeline. In fact, the entire world's timeline with the Azeroth as its core is already converging. Nosdorm raised his hand, and Xueqi saw the countless white lines in the void that were originally parallel to each other slowly converging and finally merging like rivers flowing into the sea. The final timeline will all merge into one? Xueqi muttered. The Bronze Dragon King continued speaking in one breath. That's right. I don't know where you got your knowledge of time and space. Normally, mortals can't have such knowledge. If you don't tell me where you came from, I won't ask. Anyway, it's convenient for us to communicate. The world of Azeroth has already realized the threat of the Burning Legion. It is gathering the timelines. This is to gather all of its forces in order to deal with the enemy's attack. If there is a huge difference in the timelines, there will often be a huge conflict when they merge, and the world in one of the timelines might even collapse. However, the world itself has an extremely perfect method for the merging of the timelines. Don't worry. To mortals, this process is more like a silent merging. That is to merge the timelines that are not too different first. For example, if there is a difference of less than 10% between two timelines, then it is a peaceful merging. Usually, in a main timeline, those mortals will suddenly feel that they have more memories. From then on, this history that actually exists in another timeline will become all of their memories and continue to develop this timeline. Generally speaking, using a more powerful and main timeline as the foundation for the merging and merging other timelines can achieve a 99% peaceful merging. When Nosdorm said this, Xueqi already knew what he was going to say next. If the merging can't be resolved in a peaceful way, then directly use a reasonable reason to make the two worlds clash. The world will directly drive any side to destroy the other side, turning the loser into the real history, and allowing the winner's timeline to continue to evolve. Of course, if the world's will doesn't like the current evolution of the main timeline, it might send someone with the opportunity to change fate to another timeline to create a new history. Hearing this, Xueqi's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Nosdorm was talking about the official transmigrator of history, Braindead Roar? However, Braindead Roar didn't do anything good. In the end, he transmigrated and ultimately failed. This time, he was completely destroyed. Xueqi said, "All right, what do you hope or think I should do?" Nosdorm smiled. His smile was as pure as a fox's. "You can jump to other timelines and merge all the timelines into one. Then, you can dominate the elemental power there. Then you will have enough power to become a true god." Chapter 1905. What the hell? That's a good idea. But, hey, Nosdormu, aren't you the guardian of time? If you encourage me to go to other timelines, aren't you the one who's going against me? You have your own will and ideals in other timelines, right? Xueqi was a little embarrassed. Nosdormu nodded and waved his hand, conjuring a sofa made of sand. He sat down casually. That's for sure. Every Nosdormu has his own ideals. Perhaps some will be willing to let you go to other timelines to change your fate. Perhaps some will see you as a malignant tumor of time and attack you on the same level as the Eternal Dragon Army. Ma told me that it's better to listen to the words before the but. What does their ideals have to do with me? It's not like I have to protect it. And for me, my fate, normally speaking, is only maintained until my future self comes to challenge my present self to a duel, and finally perish together. Nosdormu smiled, which was rare for him. According to the mission the Titans gave me, after I die, I should calmly hand over the protection of time and the creation of the future to the mortals. So, I have to hand over my life and power. You happen to be the most talented and the strongest time magician and guardian in this world. I have no problem handing it over to you. Although Nosdormu's explanation was a little confusing, Xueqi understood Nosdormu's attitude. He would continue to protect Azeroth and was happy to see changes and new ideas. Facing such a reasonable Bronze Dragon King, Xueqi really wanted to ask if he could give him another dozen. Nosdormu jumped down from the sofa and got into a fighting stance. Next, I'll fight with you. How much time power you learn will depend on your talent. If you don't have enough time power, I won't let you go to other timelines. Because once you die, you will be destroyed in the River of Time. It will even endanger the progress of the main timeline. What if I can't learn it? Xueqi asked. Then stay in the main timeline and do your job of creating the future. As for the conflicts between the different timelines, it's none of your business. You can forget about becoming a real god so easily. Of course, you can fight me as many times as you want, as long as you have the spirit and time, Nosdormu said seriously. Very reasonable. I accept. Then, Dumuk was defeated by Nosdormu in one round. This was Nosdormu's home ground, where he was the master of time. Don't look at how Xueqi was acting all high and mighty outside, using a giant elemental god to beat up Deathwing. But it didn't work here. Unless Xueqi wanted to destroy the entire Cavern of Time with a massive amount of water and fire elemental essence, forcefully stirring space-time into a chaotic state, Xueqi would have to fight according to Nosdormu's law of time. What is time? Nosdorm began his performance. Duke threw out a large fireball to test the waters. In the next instant, A huge fireball came towards him, and Xueqi was directly hit by it. Bang! Xueqi opened his magic shield in a thousandth of a second and then activated Ice Barrier. Unfortunately, it was of little use. A sharp pain came instantly. He hadn't felt this kind of injury in a long time. Cough, cough, cough. Xueqi's entire body began to twitch. Only then did his mind activate the system genie and replay what had just happened. Scene 1. Xueqi threw a large fireball. Scene 2. Dormu stopped time and moved Xueqi over, making Xueqi eat his own large fireball. Scene 3. A mysterious halo flashed, and Xueqi could clearly feel that his strength had greatly decreased in the scene. If he guessed correctly, it should be that Dormu used time to temporarily degenerate his strength, causing his strength to drop to the level before he became a demigod. That was a demigod-level large fireball. Just a little bit more, and Xueqi would have bid farewell to his life, which he hadn't seen in a long time. While he typed GG in the midst of laughter, he didn't even know if his corpse could run away. Looking at the miserable Xueqi who was about to turn into charcoal, Dormu waved his hand and sent Xueqi away. That's all for today. You can go back first. I know you have a lot of mortal affairs to take care of. Finish dealing with them first, arrange everything, and then come here to focus on training. Okay. Feeling the return of his strength, Xueqi now had the body of a demigod, and this injury could only be described as pain. When Xueqi used the elements to fully repair his injury, all that was left was the memory of the pain. Coming out of the cavern of time, Xueqi let out a long sigh of relief. As expected, the path to becoming a true god isn't so simple. This can also be considered a challenge. Because the cataclysm was dealt with cleanly, Azeroth finally returned to its long-lost peace. The cataclysm was over, but the damage to the earth was still not easily healed. Thrall used the Ring of Earth organization as a foundation to carry out various work, and at the same time, tried to reconcile the conflict between the Alliance and the Horde. Xueqi's response was neither soft nor hard. Talk? Sure. Let Gurus find a neutral place to talk to me. As the commander of the Alliance, I will talk to him as an equal. With Xueqi's current status, being willing to make such a promise was already giving Thrall face. Unfortunately, when Thrall returned to Orgrim, he was met with failure. Brainless Roar not only ridiculed Thrall's incompetence, saying that Thrall abandoned the Horde in search of power, but still achieved nothing. He did not appease the rioting elements, nor did he become a demigod. He completely rejected all of Thrall's suggestions. Seeing Thrall's return, Tauren Magatha Grim Totem also secretly encouraged a group of orc chiefs, hoping to pass a motion. Those who had been great chiefs were not qualified to challenge Makara, because this represented the incompetence of the former great chiefs. Originally, this motion had a high chance of passing, but Brainless Roar rejected it himself. Come on! If Thrall asks to challenge me with Makara, then I will choose to accept. I will let him see that only the strongest warrior is qualified to lead the Horde forward. In fact, in the current Horde, there were not many people who wanted Thrall to return. This was because the opponents had all led their own tribes away from the Horde, leaving behind most of the new generation of traditional orcs. These simple-minded people could not see how much the Horde had sacrificed to eliminate the traitor, Gudjal. They only saw that they had gained a lot as the victors. Hundreds of thousands of people died. Of course, the food pressure was reduced. In addition, after occupying the oasis in the Great Rift Valley in the Barren Lands, because of the special climate there, the trees were in a state of crazy growth. The Horde was able to use the wood to rebuild Orgrim. Garissa's reputation did not fall, but rose. Chapter 1906. The livelihood of the tribe was restored to balance. Most of the beast men were very simple-minded. They did not see that this was at the expense of the overall strength of the tribe and the weakening of its war potential in exchange for a good life. The people were so simple. As long as they could get by, there would be no complaints. Garusha's reputation was rising steadily. Seeing this, Sal could only helplessly retreat to the second line. By borrowing the merit of the dragon's soul to help with work, Sal was finally able to establish a connection with the Wormrest Temple. However, the relationship did not go any further. Alexstrasza, who was in charge of life, acknowledged the Ring of Earth, but was far from being particularly appreciative. The focus of the dragon aspect was to protect the planet. In this regard, the Alliance did a good job, while the tribe lagged far behind. The strength and recent actions of the tribe made the tribe still a dispensable existence in the eyes of the Wormrest Temple's dragons. The alliance ushered in a new period of rapid development. After confirming Nasario's death, Xueqi used his superb political and economic skills to adjust the alliance's economy from a wartime economy to promoting technological and economic development in just 1 month. In the form of public bidding, it was announced that in the next 10 years, more than 50,000 kilometers of railways would be built throughout the Eastern Kingdom and Northrend, and train stations would be built in every town with a population of more than 1,000. It did not matter if the countries could not pay. All the money would be advanced by the wealthiest countries or organizations in the alliance. In exchange, the countries that built the railways would give tax, tariff, and market concessions, as well as a time-limited market monopoly. During the monopoly period, the market would be in a state of monopoly. In fact, Xueqi was playing with the One Belt One Road of the former Celestial Empire. This was a form of win-win. With transportation settled, there would be logistics and commercial circulation. The people would naturally become richer and their lives better. With money, the economy, industry, and technology could be developed. In fact, the Marcus family, Kultiras, and Alterac, the 3 richest families in the alliance, were earning more and more money. With the military strength of the alliance as a backing and guarantee, they also contributed the most to the alliance membership fees. This allowed the alliance to have money to purchase all kinds of mineral resources on a large scale. In the name of the alliance, Xueqi placed a large number of industrial orders with Iron Stove Fort and Stormwind. From the simplest long swords and axes to conventional cargo ships and diesel vehicles, to the military industry's tanks and flying battleships. The huge orders would make the countries that were willing to industrialize, be it the government or the private sector, all of them would make a lot of money. Xueqi also took care of the tolerance of the various countries and races. The union fees could be adjusted every year, or even every quarter after negotiation, to ensure that the costs were within the range of the alliance's ability to enjoy the benefits of the global economic integration within the alliance, while also being able to take on enough obligations. If he didn't have money, he could give them mineral resources. If he didn't even have that, he could give them to people. Regardless of whether it was the Guardian Fortress of the Dark Portal or other places, they all required a large number of soldiers. Xueqi even set the proportion and degree of military training that the people received as part of the Union's dues. It was obvious that they were preparing for war. Usually, the alliance didn't have that many soldiers, but once the war started, they would realize that everyone was a soldier. The recruit training was also divided into 2 parts. Some of the more traditional ones would train for warriors, mages, hunters, and other professions. Those with better brains would be taught car soldiers, tank soldiers, and even sailors and aviation training. After completing the training, they would practice with old models of equipment. Only the most outstanding soldiers would be accepted into the alliance's army, while the others would be assigned to the private sector. For example, the ships would be transferred to the alliance's regular routes to Darnassus and Exodar. Those who drove tanks would first make do with bulldozers. Those who flew battleships would be sent to survey the map. Not only did Xueqi hide wealth from the people, but he also hid soldiers from the people. Time passed day by day. The Dark Portal January 27th. First, the Alliance passed the latest bill. Due to the continuous years of war, too many young men died in battle, resulting in more women than men, causing a series of social problems. The Alliance did not force the countries to open up polygamy to replenish the population. At the same time, the Alliance would give special subsidies to the Alliance's soldiers according to their military rank, including high maternity subsidies. If the soldiers had 2 or more children, the women in the family would receive a series of financial subsidies and benefits that could easily support the children without working. This stimulated the enthusiasm of young girls to marry soldiers. However, this was ridiculed by many as a certain alliance commander wanting to legally open a harem. Hence, the nickname of this bill became the famous Harem Bill. Because on February 14th, Xueqi stretched his head and pulled back, and all kinds of procrastination symptoms acted up, but he still couldn't escape that knife. He got married. In Stormwind City, Xueqi really did marry 4 queens in one go this time. As a citizen of Stormwind City, this day was full of pride. Because their own Duke Marcus, had married 4 queens in one go. On the top platform of the Eye, high-level officials and guests from various countries gathered to witness the spectacular scene that was rarely seen in 10,000 years. In the Alliance, and even in all of Azeroth, there would not be a wedding of a higher standard than this. The people who attended the wedding were the 3 queens of the Sleeping Dragon Temple, Alexstrasza, Isera, and Onyxia. They appeared in human form, especially the first two. The huge dragon horns on their heads caused many people to be inwardly shocked. Guardians of Odor, Taurime, Freya, and Mimiron. The first two were too huge, so they could only stand on the mountain next to the eye. The four guardians of Alkavon. The earth elemental world, the newly subdued Lord Serathane. The water elemental world, the former Lord Neptulon. The fire elemental world, the current Lord Majordomo. The wind elemental world, the liberated Wind Prince Thunderin, who became Queen Syria's deputy. And all the kings and leaders of the alliance. The last one was the chief of the front tribe, Thrall. In a sense, if all the big bosses here were destroyed, not only the alliance but the world would also be finished. Of course, this was just a joke, because almost all the best fighters in the world were here. Other than the three big bosses of the Burning Legion at their peak, who else could deal with these guys? The bridegroom is in place. Play music to welcome the brides. The ceremonial officer was Stormwind King Varian Rin. What could he do? He was Duke Kuz Jr., so he couldn't refuse. The melodious wedding march sounded from the royal orchestra. Thump, 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 thump. Hearing this beautiful melody, everyone couldn't help but imagine the following scenes in their minds. Marriage, sweetness, love, ah. How beautiful! 36 innocent, lively and cute children formed a choir and sang in unison, hand over the money, hand over the money. Hurry up and hand over the money, all the big bosses. Chapter 1907. At this moment, the hearts of countless big shots crumbled. Those who were not familiar with Xueqi, such as Stormguard's King Danath Trollbane or the Old Wolf King Jean, were already feeling uneasy. Was this the Alliance's latest robbery? Was it because their gifts to Xueqi weren't valuable enough that Xueqi was unhappy? Xueqi wasn't just the #1 person in the Alliance. His identity as a demigod of the Weave was enough to make him irreplaceable in the Alliance. Not to mention that he was one of the founding members of the Alliance. Ever since he took control of the Alliance, he had pushed the Alliance to the top of the world and left behind indelible achievements. His immortality as a demigod was enough for him to control the Alliance until the end of time. They were terrified, but most of them reacted by bursting into laughter. Kudrin Wildhammer almost burst out laughing. He pulled out a feather from his pocket. Ha 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 ha. Xueqi, you bastard, you can't even let go of your own wedding? You want more money? Sure, I'll give you more scarlets but hair. Xueqi rolled his eyes. Hey, what do you mean by giving me a griffin feather? Jerbin took out a dirty ring from his pocket. This ring represents the highest level of achievement in machinery. It's the foundation of all machinery. Damn it, where did this hexagonal ring come from, and one with internal screws? Do you really think that I, Xueqi, don't know that this is a nut? Muradin Bronzebeard said that he was willing to introduce a Mora Bronzebeard to Xueqi. Duke rejected the offer. Dwarves were famous for their high bone density and muscle density. Amelia was a widow, and she even lost 150 pounds in the back of her head. Forget it. Love is too heavy, and I, Xueqi, am too weak to lift it. Hey, my harem are all looking at me with wary eyes. What's the meaning of this? Xueqi said righteously, staring back with bright eyes. Am I, Xueqi, such a shameless person? The four brides and the harem all nodded in unison. Yes, you are. Xueqi was gloriously defeated, becoming a loser in life. With the dwarves taking the lead, the atmosphere instantly became joyous. Alexstrasza said that she was willing to give Xueqi a treasure that symbolized her power, a piece of the Red Dragon Queen scale to Xueqi. However, in the blink of an eye, it was sold by her sister Isera, who said that her sister had gotten it last night when she was doing her nails out of boredom. Taurime said that he could breed his mount with Xueqi's fire eagle. Alkafon casually made a clay figurine and tossed it to Xueqi. Only Xueqi, the bridegroom, was exasperated and shouted, Gavin Rad! I know it's you. You're dead. Yes, there was only one culprit who could do such an unreliable thing, was someone close to Xueqi, and had enough influence to cause trouble in Stormwind, Gavin Rad Misfortune. On this day, Gavin Rad felt like he had seen hell for the first time in a long time. The fun was over. When the confused children's choir found out that they had been tricked, they sang the standard wedding march again. Anyone would feel that it was very improper. The brides came on stage. There was no distinction between who came first and who came first. Like sisters, they held each other's hands and hummed an unknown tune as they entered the stage together. The first to attract everyone's attention was definitely Elucia. As the only daughter of the wealthiest Bear family and the current queen of Alterac, Elucia wore a white hollowed-out wedding dress. However, the wedding dress was heavily embroidered with gold. The entire wedding dress could be described as brilliant. Together with Elucia's well-proportioned figure, she looked very noble. Kalia's style was completely different from Elucia's. The simplest pure white was enough to perfectly present her beauty and innocence to everyone. There was no need to say much about the wealth of Lord Darren. This kind of natural beauty gave people a different kind of feeling. Jaina seemed to be the simplest. From afar, she looked like a white robe with blue edges. However, the hazy white gauze headscarf and white gauze cloak, matched with a slightly revealing design similar to the quicksand robe, could perfectly display the quality and violence of her mage peak. It gave off a kind of sexy, hazy, and mysterious intellectual beauty. Sylvanas, who was in the middle, had the tallest figure. In terms of the majesty of her chest, she was slightly inferior to Jaina. However, for the first time, she used an elven-style robe and modified it to suit Duque's taste. This emerald green robe already looked a bit like a cheongsam. The high slit completely displayed the slender legs unique to the elves. Duque's achievements did not include those sitting in the first row of the viewing platform. Aurelia and Sasha, who were carrying their daughters. Vashti, who was obviously a high-ranking official, but only wore the maid uniform of the Marcus family. Countess Katrana, who was read as Onyxia, the Black Dragon Queen. Chief Elven Priestess Tyrande, who looked dignified and elegant, but actually looked like she could not wait to go up there herself. And the Draenei leader Imriel, who seemed a little shy and a little curious. Even the human kings of the various countries could not help but praise Duque's good taste and methods. He actually managed to get the most beautiful women of the various countries. If Duque changed his identity, perhaps he would be a bunch of envious and hateful gazes. The wedding ceremony continued. Different races, countries, and customs were different. In fact, they did not need worldly etiquette. This wedding was more like an explanation to their respective citizens. There was no need for a seemingly solemn, but anyone could violate the lines. Some were very simple. The four brides held hands and sang around Duque. Duque, my dear Duque. You are my favorite. I am even willing to share your love with my sisters. No need for promises. Because we know that you will accompany us until the end of the world. The end. In theory, there was also a part where the rings were exchanged, and then the groom kissed the bride. Then, may I ask which bride the groom will kiss first? Tyrande, who was known as the MC but was actually a troublemaker, threw out such a question with a smile. Duque broke out in a cold sweat. Teacher Tyrande, isn't this question beyond the syllabus? As long as she was a woman, she could not help but feel competitive. It was one thing to be willing to marry Duque, but it was another thing to know where she ranked in Duque's heart. At first, the four brides looked like they did not care. But, what are you guys playing at? Elucia turned her body sideways, revealing her flawless back. Kalia leaned forward slightly, her fingers grazing her sexy collarbone. Jaina's arms that were holding the flowers gathered in the middle, and her magic peaks seemed to be on the verge of bursting out. Sylvanas intentionally or unintentionally pulled down the opening of her cheongsam, showing off even more exaggerated leg lines. Freebie question? No. This was a freebie question. A queen of the harem with a brain would never answer such a question. The moment she answered, she had already lost. The harem would definitely explode. Chapter 1908. Tyrande couldn't marry Duque because of her status, so she came out to cause trouble. He had to teach her a lesson later. But before that, the sweating Duque had to think of a way to control the situation. Otherwise, it would be a huge embarrassment if he messed up on the spot and caused a scene. Duque could feel the faint competition beneath the sweet smile. Time seemed to freeze. Duque finally moved. In an instant, he used flash. As a demigod of the weave, Duque's flash was so fast that it surpassed the limits of a mortal's vision. It was impossible to tell who he kissed first, and who he put on the ring first. In any case, the flashing light didn't stop, and it looked like four Duque kissed at the same time. However, this was not a fake like the mirror image of truth that could fool people. You are the love of my heart. The wedding square echoed for a long time. What the hell? Who was the love of his heart? Or rather, who was Xueqi talking to? Only the heavens knew. Was this trash? No, no, no. This was legal in Azeroth. Of course, even the law was set by Xueqi himself. That was the worst part. All the bigwigs were dumbfounded, and they only had one thought in their minds. Damn! Is this even possible? The four queens' brides looked at each other, a little helpless, but also a little glad. Finally, they nodded in unison. Xueqi had passed the test. Just as Xueqi put on 4 identical gold rings on his left middle finger, and he couldn't even bend it, he realized to his horror that the next question had arrived. Oh, beautiful girls. The custom in Azeroth is that the bride will throw the bouquet. The lady who catches the bouquet will most likely be the next bride to get married. Tyrande, who looked dignified and demure, continued to cause trouble. She felt like dripping wax from Xueqi's leather whip. What was most intolerable was that Tyrande was the first to take the lead, openly standing at the place where the bouquet was to be received. Even the big sisters in the harem were like this. Aurelia and Sasha didn't want to take it lying down. They smiled and went over. They were obviously hoping that Xueqi would buy a ticket next time. Onyxia, who appeared as Countess Katrana, put on an act and said, "Huh? It seems very interesting. I'll go and join in the fun." Then, he eagerly squeezed over. At this moment, there was a slight uproar among the spectators. This was a little explosive. The 2 dragon queens next to him, Alexstrasza and Isera, were surprised, but they didn't stop him. Instead, they looked at Xueqi with intriguing expressions. This is just a kind of yearning. It's not a crime to stand here, right? The hoof couldn't help but run over. Vashj, dressed like a maidservant, silently joined the queue. This marriage of hate was already a little extravagant. At this time, a person who was not expected by everyone ran over stupidly. Bridget Abbess. Back then, she was the daughter of Marshal Abbess. Now she was also a general. As the daughter of an old friend, she was also invited to the ceremony. Xueqi's harem quickly exchanged glances, indicating that Xueqi probably didn't touch it. Is it strange that I'm here? Actually, I want to get married too. Unfortunately, he's missing. Bridget played with her fingers a little uneasily. Missing? Is it Ronan? Kalia asked with concern. Bridget's face instantly turned red. The answer was obvious without asking. With her taking the lead, a group of marriage-hating ladies all joined the queue. Vanessa, Solarian, Sally Whitemane, basically all the heroines in the Alliance's heroes team had come out. As for who their target was, there was no way to know. This time, the silk ball tossing, the flower ball tossing, felt a little like child's play, because there were as many as 4 flower balls. But there were more than 4 ladies who yearned for the flower balls. Seeing the ladies' eyes turn from passionate to fanatical, Xueqi knew that he was in big trouble this time. But what could he do? He was also in despair. The 4 flower balls were thrown to the back of the 4 brides' heads as they shouted, 1, 2, 3. Xueqi could tell at a glance that these troublemakers were all cheating. According to the trajectory determined by the system, Kalia had thrown it to Bridget on purpose, and even secretly used holy light, which was a method used to designate a target to cast a healing spell. She was pitiful Bridget. He didn't know what deal Queen Sylvia had made with Alucia, but Alucia had thrown it first on purpose, and then Queen Sylvia's flower ball would directly hit Alucia's flower ball, and then fly straight towards Aurelia and Sasha. Onyxia, on the other hand, had silently blocked the path of Jaina's flower ball. Her hands were full of elements, which would attract the faint frost elements in Jaina's flower ball, forming something like frost-fire arrows. Xueqi was speechless. A proper wedding had turned into trouble. Speaking of which, it was still his fault. If not for Xueqi's godly sword accidentally slipping end times and entering different scabbards, there wouldn't be so much trouble. Xueqi was in despair. In this moment of despair, he suddenly saw Alexstrasza's gaze. The Red Dragon Queen's narrowed eyes were full of mockery, but she spoke to Xueqi telepathically. Do you want to be saved? Little bastard. If you do beg me, I'll write off all the favors I owe you. I'm begging you, Your Majesty. Without even thinking for a second, Xueqi decisively admitted defeat. Fine. You're the one who said that. Don't go back on your word. F***CK. She was clearly a female dragon, so why was she smiling like a fox? I won't. Duque didn't care about integrity or anything. He just wanted to get through this turbulent wedding as soon as possible. The next second, the queen snapped her fingers. The flower balls in the air immediately began to grow wildly. In just a breath's time, each flower ball expanded to twice its size. Queen Sylvie immediately understood. A gust of evil wind blew over, and each of the flower balls split into two. When the flower balls finally fell, each of the girls Duque had flirted with had won, and the rest had been snatched by the other ladies. This maneuver was simply too amazing. On the grandstand, Gavin Rad, who was the only one beaten black and blue, suddenly said emotionally, I say that FFF flamethrower that Duque invented seems to be used for this kind of occasion. I suddenly want to burn that guy Duque down. Next to him, the Empress Dowager rolled her eyes at her unreliable brother. Please, don't make trouble at a time like this, okay? I don't even want to tell people that I know you. Gavin Rad accidentally guessed a shocking secret, but he didn't get a reward. A joyful, harmonious, yet thrilling wedding ended in a chorus of blessings. Apart from Tyrant being taught a lesson by Duque that night, everyone was happy. What a mess. Chapter 1909. Whispers could make one go crazy if they were heard too much. Duque didn't believe this before, but now he did. Little brother over there, come and play. If you can catch me, I'll let you. Hurry up, or I'll sleep first. Blindfolded and forbidden from sensing the elements, Duque listened to the whispers of his wives coming from all directions. Queen Sylvie, that bastard, actually used the wind to change the direction of the sound in order to confuse Duque. It sounded like every sound was close to his ear, but in reality, they were worlds apart. If Duque didn't cheat, he could play hide-and-seek until dawn and still not catch a wife. The sound was muddled, and even the surrounding wind messed up the heat and elemental flow. But Duque had the system. An ultrasonic sonar scan made everything clear. Duque made a diversion and quickly caught a warm and fragrant female body. They were old married couples, so Duque naturally knew who was the softest. Of course, it was Miss Kalia. Kalia, who was extremely kind, had always given in to Duque without any bottom line. It was just that Duque respected her and rarely bullied her. Today was a good day, so he couldn't possibly sleep until dawn. Duque's godly sword came out. A cold sword light circled 19 times. Exuding a mysterious charm, Duque's godly sword was instantly unsheathed. After a round of sword flowers, Miss Kalia was unable to resist. She could only use the lying corpse swordsmanship and let herself be slaughtered by Duque. Woo! Kalia was like a bullied puppy, letting out an adorable cry. Unfair. Duque attacked Kalia first. There must be some flaw. The three wives were all talking at once. Unwilling to be at a disadvantage, they could only surround him. Duque's godly sword dashed left and right, sword after sword, ring after ring. He continuously launched powerful stabs at the four enemies. Just as Duque was about to win, Queen Sylvie and Kalia despicably took hostages. They touched their bellies, and Duque retreated in defeat. Initially, Duque could have vented his anger on Jaina and Alucia, but who knew that the two shameless mages would actually use blink to escape. As soon as Duque caught up, he found himself ambushed from all sides. Aurelia, Sasha, Tyrant, Vashj, Onyxia, and the Hoof had all been lying in ambush. Humph! I'm not afraid. Let me tell you, Duque, will fight 10 of you tonight. Duque really did it. Although he was tired, Duque fought without rest. He could not lose. Once they lost, their good days would come to an end. Moreover, Duque's main target was the traitor Tyrant. Without her, Duque wouldn't have been so embarrassed during the day. The wedding was over. On the 28th of February, Queen Sylvie finally gave birth to another child of Duque. He meowed, and it was a daughter. Of course, mortals could not imagine why Queen Sylvie's belly looked so smooth on the 14th of February. Why did she give birth in 14 days? Sorry, but the birth of a god was more like rapid cell division. With enough divinity, and divine power, they could give birth whenever they wanted. There was no reason, it was just that willful. Although Queen Sylvie was only a demigod, she adjusted her body perfectly. In order to not show her belly at the wedding, she even deliberately compressed her internal organs. 6 flew up. Queen Sylvie did not give birth to a human child as Xueqi wished, and it turned out to be an elf girl. The race of a god's descendants was really a little uncontrollable. For example, the most amazing demigod, Malorn, was a white deer. Elune was a true god whose form was unknown, but in theory, she had the appearance of a woman. The child they gave birth to was a centaur. After a certain someone argued with Queen Sylvie repeatedly, they finally decided on her name, Artemis Windrunner. She was meant to be the goddess of the hunt in Greek mythology on Earth. She would be the queen who inherited the throne of Sindh Dorii, regardless of whether there were other children in the future. Anyway, it was her. After the child was born, Azeroth's affairs were all settled. Duke finally announced in the harem that he would be going to Nozdormu's place to be trained. He would be going on a journey of time in preparation for becoming a true god. Unexpectedly, Queen Sylvie burst out, "I'll go with you." Duke's whole body was Sparta. This is not good, right? He thought that Queen Sylvie would give him a domineering look, then threaten Xueqi with a divine sword in her hand, and break the sword if he messed around. However, after Xueqi finished speaking, Queen Sylvie just came up and gave Xueqi a big hug. Not only her, but the three Windrunner sisters also took turns to hug Xueqi. Not far away, the harem stared at Xueqi with bright eyes. Servana said affectionately, "Just like how you've given me countless chances to challenge myself, to break through my limits. Be it me or my sisters, we are not women who do not know what's good for us." Tyrant put her hands on her hips. Today, she was dressed like a ranger and looked very valiant. "We are not canaries in a cage." Sasha pursed her lips. "Not only are we your lovers, but we also hope to be your strong support. We're not dispensable existences." Aurelia concluded, "Since it is rare for Sylvanas to keep up with you, why not let her try?" Xueqi sighed, but also felt gratified. He had followed the big events and rescued people who were bound to die from the gates of hell many times. It seemed like it was time to bear fruit. "Sylvanas, it is not impossible for you to come with me. First, you have to pass Nozdormu's test." "Of course." Queen Sylvie puffed out her chest proudly. She never backed down in the face of difficulties. "Then, you have to be mentally prepared. Things that happen in other timelines will be very different from what you know about the main timeline. For example." She raised her golden eyebrows. Jaina was the smartest. "Xueqi, did you spy on the major events in other timelines?" In the past, this was just a hypothesis circulating in the harem. Now that Xueqi said so, it was clear proof. Xueqi was also a little hesitant, but in the end, he still chose to accept. "You can say that it's like this. Mortals would never be able to pry into the mysteries of time in their entire lives. I can only say that in the many timelines that I know of. Sylvanas, you're dead. You've become the cold queen of the Forsaken. You're separated from Aurelia and Windsor by life and death." Hiss. The three Windrunner sisters' faces were filled with disbelief and shock. This was especially true for Queen Sylvie. Her entire body froze, and then she began to tremble uncontrollably. Aurelia and Sasha immediately hugged their sisters. Chapter 19:10. But in just a few seconds, Queen Sylvia suddenly laughed, flew over, hugged Xueqi tightly, and gave Xueqi a deep kiss. Who changed her fate of certain death? Was there even a need to ask? "Thank you for granting me a new fate, for granting my most beloved baby Artemis." With passion, ecstasy, and complex feelings that bordered on devout faith, Queen Sylvia kissed Xueqi again and again. In the end, it became like a chick pecking at rice. It was quite interesting. After the excitement faded, everyone regained their calmness. "Vashj, aren't you going?" Jaina asked. Since only a true demigod had the right to restrain the timeline, Vashj also had the right to do so. Vashj was taken aback, but in the end, she shook her head. "No need, I know. Perhaps in other timelines, I would only be a tragic existence. If not for Master's redemption 10,000 years ago, I might have gone mad in those 10,000 years at the bottom of the sea, fallen into evil ways, and finally been killed." Vashj raised her head, looked at Xueqi and said sternly, "If it is Master's request, I will try. But if Master does not force it on me, I would rather stay here and protect Master's foundation and the few young Masters. I will always be Master's maid, Serena Ubisha." Xueqi was clearly moved. Yes. She changed the fate of many people. Xueqi took a deep breath. "All right, I don't know how long it will take for me to go this time. But I swear that I will definitely rush back before the Burning Legion invades. Before I leave, I will write down a contingency plan for what might happen and give it to you. I will leave the rest to everyone. Yes, Duque, we will wait for you. The 9 beautiful women said in unison. On the 1st of July, year 27 of the Dark Portal, there was a major change in the Alliance's regime. The Supreme Commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, announced that he would travel through time with the Queen of Sindh Dorii, Sylvanas, in search of the path of truth. The position of Supreme Commander would be left empty for Duque. At the Throne Conference, the leaders of the nations unanimously elected Varian Rin as Deputy Commander-in-Chief and Acting Commander-in-Chief of the Alliance, and Jaina Proudmoore as Second Commander-in-Chief. On the same day, the Alliance announced the first 5-year plan with the goal of preparing for the Burning Legion, covering technology, military, economy, and other aspects. The administrative organization that Duque had spent 12 years to build was based on the Throne Conference, and it handled all the problems within the Alliance extremely well. The operation of the Alliance was so good that many middle and lower-class people felt that it wasn't a big deal even without Duque. Only the true leaders of the countries and races knew how far-sighted Duque was. As long as the executors didn't court death and followed the path and direction that Duque had set, the Alliance would still be in a golden age of rapid development in the next 10 years. In fact, it was hard to think crooked. More than half of the leaders of the Alliance's countries and races were Duque's women, while the rest were the staunch supporters of Duque's high-tech route. As the acting commander-in-chief, Varian was a typical combative leader with a high political score of 5. He couldn't wait to completely ignore the internal affairs and devote himself to military training and upgrading armaments. Duque and Queen Sylvanas, who had completely disappeared from the public's view, didn't immediately leave the main Azeroth timeline. They were beaten up in the caverns of time. Nozdormu didn't respect the old and loved the young. Instead, he was equal to men and women. He didn't care if you were Duque or Queen Sylvanas. He wouldn't hold back when it was time to beat you up. Queen Sylvanas slashed a wind blade at the humanoid Nozdormu, but she was mercilessly mocked. Nozdormu paused the time in the space where the wind blade was and used it to sharpen his nails. Unfortunately, the wind blade couldn't even be sharpened by Nozdormu's nails, which were made of sand. It shattered upon contact. Fool! At least Duque's attack has some destructive power. Your attack only has the so-called speed, but it has no destructive power. What's the use? In front of Queen Sylvanas, Nozdormu actually squeezed Duque's fireball into a ball like he was squeezing plasticine. When the fire element could no longer be compressed, there was a muffled poof, and the fireball exploded like a balloon. Although the range of the explosion was very small, at least Nozdormu didn't do anything. Do you see? Time and space are extensions of each other. You have to imagine it in your mind. Time is a thread, from the past to the present. To break through time, you have to imagine how to turn linear things into three-dimensional things. Nozdormu opened his arms. I have already deliberately cut the time here into pieces so that it is no longer bound by the river of time. The first step you have to do is to clearly feel the fragments of time, and then connect the timeline from 10 seconds ago to the next second. It sounded like a game of catch dragons, but if one didn't have that knowledge, they wouldn't even understand it. Even if they understood, they had to have the talent. This was the caverns of time. If Nozdormu wanted to, he could abuse Queen Sylvanas at any time. As for Duque, he was very surprised. Over the years, Nozdormu had seen many strong people, many of whom were demigods. None of them gave him a strange feeling like Duque. Many times, he felt that Duque's soul seemed to be separated or split. He had clearly used the time spell to slow down Duque's speed, which should have slowed down the flow of time for his entire body and even his soul. However, he was very sure that there was a small special existence in Duque's soul that ignored his time spell and had been operating in the normal flow of time. Nozdormu's guess was confirmed in the following practice. Duque didn't immediately try to control the time in the wide area. He used the standard spell, Deceleration, which was included in the standard spell, and the target was himself. Arcane spells were known as the weaker version of the Titan rune spell, which was also an energy manipulation spell. The deceleration spell that Duque used now had already surpassed the scope of arcane spells and belonged to the Titan energy. Duque was very cunning. The deceleration spell that he used on himself didn't reduce his speed by too much. It was only 1%. Speed was relative. Mystery was also relative. High mystery energy naturally crushed low mystery energy. Although Xueqi only slowed down by 1%, when Nozdormu used the time spell to reduce his speed by 90%, Nozdormu's time spell was unexpectedly blocked by Xueqi's Titan energy. From the original 10%, which was slow motion, to a mere 1%, this was more than a leap. Nozdormu was unhappy. He threw a speed punch and directly sent Xueqi flying. Brat, don't play tricks. Chapter 1911. As a great transmigrator, Xueqi's comprehension was far above that of Queen Sylvanas. His understanding of time and space was also deepened by playing a large number of 3D games back then. Queen Sylvanas soon discovered that she was left far behind by Xueqi in this aspect. She suddenly felt that her thousands of years of life seemed to have been in vain. Days passed, and finally one day, Xueqi stepped out of that door. On the other side, in Azeroth, after the Terminator army led by Nesario was beaten like dogs, the world entered a rare period of peace. No one in the Alliance relaxed. The return of the Burning Legion in Xueqi's prophecy was like the sword of Damocles hanging over the necks of every creature in Azeroth. In addition, the development of the tribe was quite eye-catching. After the great division of the tribe led by Brainless Roar, which was composed of almost pure orcs, had a rare period of peace. It probably lasted until Xueqi announced the start of the time travel, and the tribe immediately launched a tentative war. Magatha Grimtotem had always announced that it was immoral and unreasonable for the Taurens to leave the tribe. On the 15th of July in the 27th year of the Dark Portal, Garrosh announced that he supported Magatha's Grim Totem organization and declared war on Thundercliff. On the surface, this was a civil war among the Taurens. In fact, as many as 150,000 elite Agrima soldiers had stepped into the Mulgore area. After the last cataclysm, the Taurens' total population had fallen below 100,000 because of the attack on the Twilight Fortress. In addition, Magatha was quite influential and divided the Taurens. In fact, there were less than 50,000 Taurens united under Kain's son, Bane. A considerable number of innocent Taurens who did not understand the situation expressed neutrality. On the mountain road to Mulgore from the southern barren land, in order to prevent Theramore's troops from killing their way out of the Dust Wallow swamp, the Mulgore Gate was built as a fortification. But soon this giant gate became a joke. The Alliance's flying battleships could watch quietly from the sky while the Taurens worked like lame clowns below. They did not expect that instead of blocking the humans, they would be used to block the tribe. Bane led an army of 10,000 Taurens and resisted the allied forces of 200,000 Taurens and orcs for nearly a month. But that was the end of Ben's bravery. In the northern part of Mulgore, the Stoneclaw Trail was broken through by the elites of the tribe led by the demigod monster, the Goron King Gruul. His Goron army broke into Thundercliff overnight. Thundercliff, which had a weak defense, fell very easily. In addition, Magatha had sworn on the Thundercliff that he only wanted the power of the Taurens and would not kill them. In the end, the Taurens gave up resisting. Bane, who received this news, immediately realized that if he didn't retreat, he would be surrounded. Bane had no choice but to make a painful decision. He left his personal guards behind and continued to defend the Mulgore Gate to the death. Then, he brought the 5,000 Tauren soldiers to rendezvous with the refugees from the Bloody Hoof village and headed southwest. At the cost of thousands of casualties, they painstakingly crossed the mountains between Mulgore and the Feralas region and entered Feralas. Once upon a time, the tribe's area of control included Feralas, the Desolate Lands, and other areas. However, as the cataclysm brought about the proliferation of elemental creatures, the tribe's actual territory was only Duroder and the Barren Lands. After the cataclysm subsided, Garrosh's heart of a bastard, the heart of a tyrant, became active again. Bringing Mulgore back into the tribe's territory was only the first step. Garrosh's ambition was not just to take back Mulgore. It took a full 3 days for Garrosh's army, with the cooperation of Gruul, who had come to kill from the inside, to wipe out the Tauren resistance forces at the Mulgore Gate. Then the tribe's army turned Mulgore upside down, but they couldn't find Bane and his last supporters. Nearly a week later, the tribe learned that Bane had fled into Feralas with his people. Then, with a wave of his hand, the tribe used a simple raft to cross a section of the Thousand Needles that had been submerged and re-entered Feralas. The situation in Feralas was unexpected. The impact of the cataclysm was too great. In order to attack the Twilight Fortress in the Barrenlands' Great Rift Valley, the tribe withdrew their forces and gave up on Feralas. However, the Alliance set foot on the land of Feralas. Because Sodder Island, which was opposite the western coast of Feralas, would be ravaged by the furious elementals during the cataclysm. Xueqi had already prepared the Feather Moon Fortress garrison on the island to migrate before the cataclysm happened. Almost as soon as the tribe retreated from Feralas, Chandri's Feather Moon led the Feather Moon Sentinels ashore, in order to move the Feather Moon Fortress ashore after the cataclysm. Before the tribe scouts saw the majestic Elven Wind Sea Fortress, the tribe still wishfully thought that the Feralas region was still an unclaimed land after being abandoned by the tribe for so long. The decoration style was Elven, but the main city walls were obviously the product of reinforced concrete. The octagonal fortress design was completely different from the original history, and it could effectively resist all kinds of primitive catapults. The Night Elves were almost the most conservative race in the Alliance. Even so, with Xueqi's mediation and Tyron's full cooperation over the past 12 years, the Elves had still changed a lot. The most obvious was the integration with the Blood Elves. When Tyrant and Sylvanas, the two Elven leaders, could meet each other openly, there was nothing that could not be discussed. Compared to the modern weapons of the dwarves and humans, the Elves were more willing to accept the magic elves, who were once of the same race. Specifically, there were many more magic towers in the Night Elves' fortress. These magic towers, which were usually 7 stories tall, were all connected to the magic net, and were guarded by a radiant moon mage. In addition, Xueqi had opened up his technology and developed flying battleships that were purely powered by magic. The Night Elves quickly accepted this elemental battleship and built it into a very round and beautiful Elven Wind battleship. Seeing this fortress with at least 50,000 elites and more than 300 flying battleships of various sizes hovering in the air, the tribe was dumbfounded. Marco Rock, Garusha's most loyal adjutant, had led 100,000 tribe troops to receive the order to kill Bane and his remaining followers. He questioned first. "This is the tribe's territory. Elves, what are you doing here in Feralas?" On the city tower, Chandri's Feather Moon, who was now the Feather Moon Marshal, laughed coldly. "Ridiculous! Kadoriai's Feather Moon Fortress has existed in this area for more than 1,000 years. Your tribe has only been here for 2 years, and it just so happens that we are under strict orders not to have any conflicts with the tribe, so we didn't care about your indiscriminate logging in Feralas. Besides, during the cataclysm, it was clearly your territory that you gave up. Now you have the nerve to say that the Feralas region belongs to your tribe?" Chapter 19:12. Markarok choked for a moment. Just as he was about to say something, Chandri said loudly, "You want Feralas? Sure. Send a declaration of war to the Alliance, then attack. If you win, Feralas will belong to the Horde." Markarok was different from his boss. His IQ was as high as 50. He was extremely loyal and did not lack brains. The combat power of the two sides was not on the same level. Rashly starting a war with the Alliance was definitely not a decision he could make. And whether it was him or the other warlords, they all immediately noticed the change in the Alliance's attitude. In the past, the Alliance was relatively restrained towards the Horde. Even the Night Elves, who had wars and grudges with the Horde, did not attack immediately after their favorite forest was cut down. Instead, they scolded loudly. Often, before it reached the diplomatic level, the conflict would end with the Night Elves backing down. But now, the Alliance felt a little overbearing. Markarok caught a glimpse of a large white wolf sunbathing on top of a tower in the fortress. He immediately realized who it was. The demigod of the wilderness, the wolf god called Garrosh by the orcs. Now he was a member of the Guardians of Hyjal. "TC." Markarok spat fiercely. The lack of high-end combat power had always been the Horde's pain. With Gruul, there was no demigod they could send out. He changed his words and said, "We're here to kill the traitor Tauren Bane Bloodhoof and his supporters. Do you know where they went?" "Tauren? Yes, they're cutting wood and building ships near the Forgotten Coast. They've already gone out to sea." "Wait. Why would the Night Elves allow them to cut wood? And forbid the Horde from cutting wood?" Markarok was a little angry. Chandri's Feather Moon didn't hide her mockery at all. "It's very simple. Because those Tauren believe in the way of nature just like us. After their shamans cut down the trees, they immediately let them plant seeds and use shaman magic to grow them. By next year, it will be a beautiful forest again. As for you guys who only know how to destroy without any construction, just get lost." Markarok almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He was right. The Alliance protected Bane and the others. They just didn't openly protect them. They gave them a clear path and let them run to Sodder Island on their own to recuperate. It used to be a place where the elements wreaked havoc. In the past 1,000 years, the Night Elves had built the Feathermoon Fortress in order to excavate the ruins of the High Elves. But now, there were no more angry elements there, and the entire island was under the influence of Vasht's Naga. The Alliance had already secretly begun rebuilding the ruins of the Feathermoon stronghold, and there was a team of hippogriffs stationed there. There were Nagas in the sea, battleships and hippogriffs in the sky. Bane and the others were very safe. It was September of the 27th year of the Dark Portal, and Xueqi had just left the public eye. Brainless Roar had originally wanted to jump out and start an all-out war with the Alliance, but all of his subordinates and adjutants were against it, so he could only give up. In the end, Marco Rock could only lead his army back after building a few strongholds in Feralas. In the second half of 27 years, the tribe never stopped expanding. In October, the desolate lands were recovered. In November, the remnants of the wild boars in the Razor Highlands and Razor Swamp were completely wiped out, and the tribe's first fleet began to be formed in the original Thousand Needles forest, flooded by the sea after the Great Cataclysm. In December, the elites led by Gruul and his Golan army gathered in the north of the desolate lands, and the 200,000 troops of the tribe were hoarded on the east side of the Stonedalin mountain. Seeing that the situation was not right, the Prince of Trade of the Rusty Water Conglomerate, Galavix, quickly threw away his moral integrity and personally ran to Orgrimmar to apologize. The goblins of the Rusty Water Conglomerate rejoined the tribe. In view of this, the Darkspear trolls on the Echo Islands were sitting on pins and needles. Wajin knew that if he did not make a decision, the next target of Gurus's reckoning would be the Darkspear trolls. After all, the Echo Islands were on the edge of the Durotor Sea. Gurus would never allow a nail to dangle at the edge of his heart. Receiving the news of the tribe's formation of a fleet, Wajin decisively secretly contacted the Alliance and expressed his desire to join the Alliance. Varian did not agree. In the absence of Xueqi and Sylvanas, the thousands of years of conflict between the Blood Elves and the Trolls was not so easy to resolve. Moreover, Xueqi had already made a plan for this. The final decision was that the Alliance could send ships to pick up the Darkspear Trolls and open up the southernmost Stranglethorn Vale, Hagaro Island, allowing the Darkspear Trolls to live autonomously on the island. Wajin sighed. He agreed. Almost as soon as the Darkspear Trolls withdrew, the brainless roaring orcs killed their way to the Echo Islands. At this point, except for the new Undercity tribe in Winterspring, there was no other way. Gurus once again completed the unification of the tribe, connecting the tribal territories into one. The greatest leader in the history of the tribe. The strongest great chieftain. Long live Gurus. Every victory, there was always no shortage of advocates. Gurus became a little complacent in the midst of countless praises and praises. If he was a politician who mingled among the humans, he would know that there was a word called kill by flattery. The orcs who flattered him were sincere. This kind of invisible and unintentional flattery was even more hurtful. Fortunately, he still had a last trace of sanity and knew not to go to war with the Alliance. Due to the fact that the Alliance in this life was far stronger than the original history, Gurus's situation became a little strange. He could be described in one sentence: an expert in civil wars, an amateur in foreign wars. However, recently, he gave a series of unreasonable orders to his bitter little brother, the Prince of Goblin Trade, Galavix. Are you still a goblin who boasts of advanced technology? The ninth-rate gnomes of the Alliance are smarter than you. I'll give you 1 year. In any case, whatever the Alliance has, the tribe must have. Galavix was actually quite rich recently. After the cataclysm awakened the volcano on his home island, the King of Trade realized that he could use his ship to move the panicking refugees to a safe area, take away their life savings, and sell them as slaves. This way, he could make a fortune. This was originally a clever plan in history. In the end, the ship was blown to pieces in the crossfire between the tribe's ship and the Alliance's fleet. The goblin survivors swam to the Lost Islands far from the coast of Kalimdor and caused a series of events. In this life, because the tribe and the Alliance didn't fight each other after the cataclysm, Galavix succeeded and made a huge fortune. The Prince of Trade, whose life was in Gurus's hands, went to work indignantly. He made a huge promise in the black market. Anyone who could steal the technology from the Alliance would be rewarded with a sky-high reward. Chapter 1913. With a great reward, there would always be brave people. Apart from the gnomes, the scum of the human race, bounty hunters, and wanted criminals all rushed to Iron Furnace Castle. That was where the Alliance's high-tech research center and factories were located. Even though the Alliance had changed the high-tech research center to only allow dwarves and gnomes to enter and exit, unfortunately, as long as they were human, they would have all kinds of thoughts and desires. The Rustwater conglomerate was unscrupulous. What? You have trouble with your small business? Come and sign this small loan contract with 50% monthly interest. Don't worry, you will be able to pay it off soon. What? You want to treat your son? Come, sign this 30-year compound interest loan contract. No collateral? Take a picture of any beautiful girl in your house. Don't worry, as long as you pay back the money, it will not be announced. Coercion, bribery, usury, loan traps, and beauty traps were always able to lure some humans, dwarves, and gnomes to leak out their technological blueprints. It was rare for Garavix to give out a few bounties, which stimulated those who had been tricked by him to be cannon fodder. It was like buying a horse's bones with 1,000 gold coins. At this time, the Goblin Prince was shocked to find that his situation was too embarrassing. First of all, the Alliance's technological line was divided into 2:1 was the magic line, with the Titan rune magic as the core, extending to the arcane and elemental lines. All the new flying magic warships were based on the magic net. The problem was that the tribe could not have the magic net. Technology could be stolen, but where could they steal a demigod of the magic net? Even though Duque had left Azeroth, he still let Khadgar maintain the magic net's good operation. At this time, the person who controlled the magic net with the highest authority was one of Duque's wives, Queen Jaina of Kul Tiras. This kind of alliance leader had no possibility of betrayal. In the current situation where there were almost no demigod mages in the tribe, not to mention imitating a magic net, they could not even control a small area magic net. This kind of sadness could be written as a tribute to the tribe. The other was the modern industrial line that the goblins were more familiar with. It had to be said that Garavix was indeed omnipotent. He had successfully stolen the formula of TNT explosives and the relatively cutting-edge steel-making technology of the Alliance. He had even mobilized the most elite craftsmen to build a warship for the Horde using the second-hand warships that the Alliance had eliminated and converted to civilian use. It no longer looked like a garbage ship that was pieced together with countless iron sheets and steel plates. It looked like a mass-produced battleship built by a large-scale industry. The gleaming jet-black steel hull, the pitch-black cannon barrels. Just a volley of 2 cannons was enough to instantly turn a wooden target ship 2 kilometers away into ashes, exploding into a fireball and flying into the sky. For this, Garrush was quite happy and personally named it Hellscream. In response, Brainless Roar encouraged Galavix to work harder and make the tribe's flying battleships in large quantities. If the Alliance had 1,000 ships, the Horde would have 10,000. As for money and resources, there was no need to worry. The tribe would give as much as they had. Give me as much as you have. This sentence was the key point. The exam had to be. Oh no. It was Galavix who wanted to say MMP. If the commander of the Alliance had said this to Galavix, he would have been ecstatic. No matter how ugly the other party was, he would have kissed him. Every day, he would do nothing but take 100 million gold coins as soon as he woke up. The Alliance was rich. The 3 richest families in the Alliance were the Marcus family, Kurtiras, and Alterac. Any one of them was richer than the 5 goblin trading princes combined. In this life, after the establishment of the Alliance, Dumuk had always been indifferent to the goblins. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would never do business with the goblins. As a result, in Azeroth, the Hot Sand Consortium was relatively wealthy. Because the Hot Sand Consortium was a neutral force. The Alliance prohibited any military procurement with the Hot Sand Consortium, but it did not prohibit civilian trade. In fact, because the Alliance had to fight the Kiraj War a few years ago, and because they had to pass through Gadget Sand in the Tanaris Desert to collect mineral deposits from the Goro crater, they had to do a lot of business with the Hot Sand Consortium. The rest was the venture capital company that was despised by everyone. This multi-ethnic goblin group destroyed the environment for their own selfish interests. Almost everywhere they went, they were beaten to death. Recently, because of large-scale espionage operations, the Rustwater Consortium was also adjusted to the wanted rating by the Alliance. Once any member of the Rustwater Consortium was found to enter the Alliance's territory, they would be shot on the spot without approval. Now the Alliance had banned the entry of goblins. Even the Hot Sand Consortium, which had originally cooperated with them, could only trade in limited areas. In a sense, the Rustwater Consortium's source of income was also cut off. If it wasn't for Brainless Roar besieging his nest, Galawex would have to be an idiot to work with brainless Roar. The problem was that the tribe was poor. Apart from the mines, there was nothing else. Even the mines had to be dug by themselves. As for the ore refinery, metal processing plant, and parts manufacturing plant, there was nothing. The only so-called hell scream that Galawex brought to brainless Roar was a test product that was almost purely handmade at the cost of scrapping a lot of waste. Goblins were famous for their sloppy work. It was not a problem to blow themselves up into the sky. This ship was basically built by gnomes. Where did the gnomes come from? Weren't they just slaves who were scammed by loans? Only the rigor of gnomes could complete such a job. But to produce a single warship and a mass-produced warship, this place designed industrial mass production. Galawex found that even if he stole the blueprint, he couldn't mass-produce it. Not only did it involve large-scale supporting industries, but also the core and key molds could not be found. Mold masters were basically very important talents in the Alliance equivalent to generals. They and their families were closely protected. Moreover, the most sophisticated parts, molds, and production lines of the cutting-edge warships were actually produced in Odor's Mimiron workshop. Could the Rustwater Consortium extend their hands to Odor? Sorry. Those who were not in Odor would be killed directly when they got close to the storm cliff. Even 99% of the spies could not sneak into Northrend, which was now under strict military control. It was no exaggeration to say that even if the tribe could now install diesel-flying warships, they were still at least an era behind in the industrial field. Galawex was going crazy. In the beginning, he was targeted by the Alliance for doing business, and then he turned to the tribe for the first time. Now, for the tribe, he actually became a real wanted criminal. If the Alliance did not hold the principle of never declaring war first, it was estimated that they would have already fought to the tribe's door and asked the tribe to hand him over. Chapter 1914. It wasn't that the Alliance hadn't lodged a diplomatic protest with the Horde. If he could listen, then he wouldn't be brain-dead Roar. Not only was he ashamed of it, but he was proud of it. The Horde doesn't understand what you're talking about, but if the Alliance dares to step into our territory, the Horde will fight. Brain-dead Roar's clean rebuttal made Galawex even more moved. He turned around and asked Brain-dead Roar for all the Taurans who had surrendered in the last war and dragged them to the mines as slaves to mine. In fact, Gurus Hellscream had always had a very complicated fear of the Alliance. From childhood, youth, and adulthood, he had stayed in Nagrand, waiting for death. Even though the other half of his vision was the lush green Nagrand, every day he watched the gradually collapsing world and the floating islands in the sky because of the chaotic gravity. He had always felt fear. Finally, one day, the ancestors he had been praying for sent people to save him. The leader was, of course, Thrall, but it wasn't the great chief's orc army that brought the 2 million orcs out of that dangerous place, but the Alliance's flying battleships. Gurus would never forget the first time he had seen those giant artificial objects that were hundreds of meters long soar into the sky and take him and his people away. It had given him the feeling that a different race, mainly humans, had used their wisdom and power to defeat nature and conquer the world. After escaping by a fluke, all that was left was a deep sense of fear and inferiority. Compared to this high-tech civilization, the orcs were too primitive and backward. Perhaps in the past, the orcs could use the power of demons to defeat the Draenei, who were few in number. But against a race that had more people than the orcs, a race that was more civilized and more powerful than the orcs, the humans, could the orcs really win? There were no professional psychologists in this world. No one knew that when one's inferiority complex reached its limit, under the pressure of extreme fear, there would only be two possibilities for one's soul. Either it would collapse under the pressure, or it would become extremely arrogant in order to vent the pressure on one's soul after the extreme inferiority complex. Gurus was afraid of humans, afraid of Duque, and at the same time, he hated Duque, who had stolen the father he was so proud of. It was this contradictory mentality that caused him to hate the alliance led by the humans. He would not rest until he destroyed this alliance that threatened him, the orcs, and even the entire tribe. It was with this mentality that he stepped into the door of Darkness 28, October. A mysterious figure appeared and satisfied his desire. The former Sun King. An Astrian. Afraid of the Alliance? Actually, even if we can't catch up to the Alliance in a short period of time, as long as we get the weapons that the Alliance doesn't dare to attack us, that's enough. What are you referring to? Bones. Tell me what you think, or I'll tear your bones apart and feed them to my wargs. Garush did not show the slightest bit of respect to the tribe's only Breaking Dawn wizard. Anyway, in his opinion, the wretched wretch who betrayed the High Elves for immortality betrayed the Forgotten Ones under the pressure of the Lich King, and finally returned to the tribe to seek refuge shamelessly was not worthy of any respect. In a sense he was right. Anastrian was now a slave to 3 different families. Focusing rainbow. A term that Garrush had never heard of came out of that rotten mouth. The former Sun King said in an extremely tempting tone, as the most powerful arcane energy in Azeroth, the Titans gave the Blue Dragons the artifact to control magic. It helps the Spellweavers manage the magic of Azeroth. If necessary, it can even absorb the arcane energy of the entire Azeroth. However, this will make it extremely unstable. If it explodes, it might blow up the entire Azeroth into a second Outland. Oh, our world. Garrush's breathing quickened. He was so excited that he could even hear his own intense heartbeat. Every beat was so powerful that it pounded against his chest. It was precisely because he knew that the Alliance had the ability to easily destroy the tribe that he was so irritable and furious. If he could have this thing, he wouldn't have to be afraid of the Alliance. If the Alliance dared to attack, he would dare to blow up the Azeroth. What you said, is it true? Where is that thing? Even Garrush knew that he was a little too eager, and his voice trembled. Coincidentally, I know where that thing has been recently. As the price for me helping the Great Chief control this great weapon, I hope that the Great Chief can also help me with a small matter. Say it. Garrush was impatient. I hope to once again become the leader of the Forsaken so that the Forsaken can rejoin the tribe. Humph. That's for sure. That bastard Delano who betrayed his ancestors. Serves him right for not being able to return to the land of ancestral spirits. Garrush agreed without hesitation. Just as the tribe was secretly carrying out a new conspiracy. In the conference room of the Dalajan Kirin Tor Council. Unexpectedly, there were no other Kirin Tor Council members here. There were only 3 people sitting in high positions. Each of them was someone who could make the world tremble with just a stomp of their feet in the Alliance. Demigod, the current supreme leader of the Tidal Throne, Queen Naga, vice commander of the Alliance Navy, Vashj. Demigod, the current supreme leader of the Land of Fire, Dalajan Kirin Tor Council, leader of the Alliance Mage Army, Kale, that Sunstrider. Breaking Dawn Mage, the current supreme leader of the Weave, Queen Kurtiras, vice commander of the Alliance Mage Army, Jaina Proudmoore. Under the gazes of the 3 of them, there were 2 demons kneeling on one knee on the marble floor, Eridar and Gemini. Has the fish taken the bait? On the main seat, Jaina asked coldly. It has already taken the bait. As long as that brainless piranha eats this small fish, everything will be ready, Elisa said in a deep voice. There were no loopholes, right? Vashj asked. Queen Saloras replied. Don't worry, we're the best at this kind of thing. And right now, the entire Warlock tribe is under our control. As long as Mistress Proudmoore gives the order, we can immediately. Very well, you can leave. There can be no mistakes in this matter. If you mess it up, there's no need for you to exist in this world. Jaina waved her hand. Understood. Eridar and Gemini left. After the Gemini left, Kale, that sighed softly and leaned his body against the back of the bench. Are you all right? Jaina asked. I'm fine. Should I say as expected? Anastrian is still that stubborn power-hungry Sun King. Kale's evaluation of his former father was like this. Chapter 1915. After holding power for thousands of years, he wouldn't learn to give it up until the very last moment of destruction. So what if he became a lich? So what if he was once captured by Arthas? Even if he became a marginal figure among the Forsaken, he still couldn't forget power. Although the plan that Duque left behind was a bit sinister, a fly wouldn't bite a seamless egg. If his father hadn't been greedy for power, he wouldn't have fallen for it. However, he didn't hide this plan from Kale, which showed that Duque trusted him quite a bit. A treasure like Focusing Rainbow must not fall into the hands of the Horde, Kale, said resolutely. Don't worry, that brainless roar won't be able to get it. Because there's no Focusing Rainbow in this world, Jaina said with a smile. Could it be? Vashj suddenly realized. Yes, it was taken away by Duque. At this moment, in another timeline, Queen Sylvanas realized that something was wrong almost as soon as she entered this timeline. Disgusting. Such dense magic power. This is... Duque looked up at the purple-blue sky and cursed in his heart, but he quickly calmed down. Damn it, this is the magic net. The magic net that extends from the magic pivot. This timeline is probably the timeline where the blue dragon King Maligo succeeded in stirring up trouble and stirring up trouble. Queen Sylvanas raised her golden eyebrows. If the arcane elements completely dominate this timeline, then my strength will be reduced by more than half. Xueqi smirked. That's not necessarily true. After saying that, he took out a ball that looked like a blue dragon's eyeball as if he was performing a magic trick. This is focusing rainbow. Xueqi's smile widened. I thought of it when I smuggled the soul of the dragon. If an amazing treasure like the soul of the dragon can be brought over 10,000 years in one go by reducing the energy contained in it, then I can also bring over something that doesn't contain much energy but can definitely help me. What are you going to do? Is there a ready-made magic net? That's even better. Xueqi raised the focusing rainbow in his hand. Queen Sylvanas found that the bead was getting bluer and bluer, and it was even emitting a weird blue light. The light blended perfectly with the arcana elements in the sky. 10,000 kilometers away, in Nassen's magic core, the blue dragon on duty was bored to death. Ever since their king, Maligos, took back control of all the arcane energy in Azeroth, the previously arrogant humans, elves, and the Forsaken all became defeated dogs. After a futile struggle, even Alexstrasza had to admit that the Blue Dragon Legion was right. The Blue Dragon army was in a good mood. All of a sudden, the ancient Blue Dragon noticed something amiss. The weave was still filled with a familiar scent, but it felt different. The weave had lost control, but it did not go berserk. It was as if there was a strange existence that was greedily seizing control. Who is it? Maligos suddenly woke up and shouted in the weave. The next moment, he found that the scene in front of him had changed. It was as if he was in the Temple of the Pantheon, and the holy elephants of the Titans stood on it, looking at him with profound eyes. My child, I am very disappointed in you. It was the voice of Amon Thul, the father of the gods. Maligos was so scared that he wet his pants. Xueqi, who was far away in the Kalimdor continent, smiled and made an okay gesture to Queen Sylvanas. Queen Sylvanas' eyes widened. You deceived the highest authority of the weave? Don't make it sound so bad. I just took back a power that was abused by Maligos on behalf of the Titans. Xueqi said shamelessly. Okay, now we have to fix this relatively powerful era. It's getting closer to the main timeline. A month later, Queen Sylvanas cursed. Xueqi, you lied to me. Wah, spare me, wife. No one knew what Xueqi was doing in the branch timeline. In the main timeline, everything was playing out according to the script. The focusing rainbow was originally a treasure of the Blue Dragon clan, and it could not be lost. However, strictly speaking, the Blue Dragons had already thrown it away twice. When Sapphiron was killed by the second fool, it was inadvertently taken away. However, Maligos, who was still crazy at the time, did not fulfill his duty to guard it, and allowed the treasure passed down to him by the Titan to fall into the hands of the Scourge army. In addition, Kalegos, that trash, had not been able to learn the Titan rune set left by Maligos after so long. In the end, he still could not control the focusing rainbow. After the Wyrmrest Temple went through a series of changes, and after killing Nesario for the second time, Alexstrasza simply announced that this thing had been taken by Xueqi to play with. Now the Blue Dragon army was following the plan that Xueqi had left behind in advance, transporting a genuine focusing rainbow from the magic pivot to the Wyrmrest Temple in the Dragonbone Waste. After the end of the cataclysm, Thrall took advantage of the opportunity of the Wyrmrest Temple to show his face to the Red Dragon Queen for a long time. While making a familiar face, he also helped the tribe clear their names many times, openly or secretly. Unfortunately, with a certain person's plan, as long as the tribe took the bait, they could no longer clear their names. On the highest floor of the Wyrmrest Shrine, the humanoid Alexstrasza was enjoying the cold wind that was only a chill to her. She was comfortably sitting on a chaise longue that Dumuk had gifted her before he left, crossing her legs and looking very happy. Sister, do you think those green-skinned creatures are really so hateful? Isra, who was also in human form, still had her eyes closed. She sat in a basket woven from vines, swaying and leisurely kicking her long calves. In essence, they are more aggressive than the progenitor dragons. Isra's words undoubtedly sentenced the tribe to death. Although the progenitor dragon was the ancestor of the chromatic dragons, it was famous for being wild and untamed, and had low intelligence. The chromatic dragons were ashamed to admit that the progenitor dragon was their ancestor. I see. Since Duque thinks so, let him be. Alexstrasza turned her head and looked at a magic mirror. Impressively, there was a man wearing a Lich King's helmet. Wother, he really isn't your subordinate, right? I swear in the name of the Holy Light, Wother said solemnly. The Dragon King sisters laughed. A Lich King swearing in the name of the Holy Light. This was really funny. If not for the arrangements that Duque had made in advance, perhaps they really would have believed that it was the remnants of the Scourge army who were causing trouble. This was because in another magic mirror, there was a team of Death Knights riding on ice dragons, attacking the unaware Blue Dragon team. Chapter 1916. After learning of the success of the plan, Great Chief Gurus Hellscream was inexplicably excited. Before the items had arrived, he hadn't slept for a single minute in 72 hours. When Anastrian saw the Great Chief's bloodshot eyes, he was also slightly stunned. Is this focusing rainbow? Why, so many of them. Brainless Howl wasn't completely stupid. He immediately realized that something was wrong. The pearls in front of him were like eyeballs, with strange vertical pupils and a blue luster. Although every one of them was emitting terrifying energy waves, and even the strongest shaman, Magatha, Grim Totem, revealed a serious expression. Why did it not match the legends? The Sun King explained, I just found out about the latest news. It seems that the current magic guardian dragon Kalegos isn't strong enough to control the complete, focusing rainbow, so he used a secret method unique to the blue dragons. He split it into 7, making it easier to control its power. Is this the so-called Titan language? Gurus pointed to one of the focusing rainbow beads, and a line of words on the pupil. It was a strange square character that no existence in this world had ever seen before. There was only one person in this world who knew how to use it, and that was Duque. Because it was Chinese, not the common language or the orc language. It said, Dear, gather 7, and you can summon the dragon god. Show me. Of course no one would understand it. Before Dumuk left, he was deliberately being mischievous. Well, even being mischievous was fun. Brainless Howl didn't know. He was so excited that he was shivering. Oh, he was shivering all over. Suddenly, he remembered the time when the orc seniors lost the war and were enslaved for 10 years. They would either be dissected every day, or they would fight to the death in the arena just to get a smile from the human nobles, and pray that the human bosses wouldn't give them the thumbs up. That feeling of being suppressed, dominated, and locked down was terrible. There was no other way. The human-led alliance brought too much pressure to him, the great chief, and even the entire tribe. The alliance's fleet, from the sea to the air, blocked every route from Kalimdor to the sea. From the Grey Valley in the north to the Feathermoon stronghold, Silithus, and Uldum in the west, the expansion of the Horde's territory was restricted from both sides. Not to mention, in the center of the tribal hinterland that was supposed to be connected, there was the strategically important Theramore in the Dustwallow swamp. Even Sal himself admitted that he had underestimated Duque's viciousness. Once upon a time, the tribe only had 100,000 people, which was enough to defend Duroder. Who would have thought that the Horde would be able to expand so rapidly? Not only did they take in a few races, but they were also able to take in more than 2 million orcs from their old home, Nagrand. The population increased, the land became barren, and the territory suddenly became insufficient. Only then did the tribe realize how vicious the alliance was. One Theramore was stuck in the middle, making the tribe feel really bad. After becoming the chief, Garush was constantly thinking about how to get rid of Theramore, who was a thorn in his side. Unfortunately, he didn't dare. Regardless of the difference in combat power and equipment between the two sides, Theramore was a classic example of being easy to defend and difficult to attack. The disgusting shape of the Dustwallow swamp was not suitable for an army to spread out. What's more, Theramore was on an island at the edge of Dustwallow Marsh. A large circle of waterways surrounded Theramore Island. Attacking from land was simply looking for trouble. But the Horde's navy, well, the phrase, 100-year-old navy, was not said casually. First of all, they had to have equipment that was not inferior to the opponent. It would be a joke to use a wooden ship to fight a warship with a steel hull. Then there was the training of the navy. It was not to say that a sailor could become a sailor just by sitting on a ship. Gunners, helmsmen, navigators, experienced captains, these talents could not be trained in a year or two. When the Alliance opened a base on Theramore, it was to bully the Horde for not having a decent navy. But now, with the focusing rainbow, everything was different. It was like a certain transmigrator. Before transmigrating, Sanpeng Jin had a nuclear bomb in his hand. If Mi dared to attack him, he would shamelessly throw the nuclear bomb. The feeling of a serf turning over and singing, going from a slave to a slave owner in one breath, was really King awesome. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. The entire Agrima Hero Valley heard Garush's heroic laughter. The Sun King carefully said, "Great Chief, I have found a way to get the thing. But do you want to try it first?" Brainless Roar was a magic idiot. He definitely knew 6 out of 7 things about magic nuclear bombs. In fact, he knew nothing about them. "Magatha, come and take a look." Not only Magatha, but he also summoned all the people who could be called magic experts. The result was, of course, his advisors and his subordinates all unanimously agreed that these 7 focusing rainbows could easily absorb all the magic elements in the surrounding atmosphere. As long as a little primer was added, there would be an earth-shattering explosion. Primer. Yes. Only the blood of the blue dragon can activate the focusing rainbow. Okay. I'll leave it to you. Before you succeed, the Horde will not admit that it has anything to do with you. Brainless Roar's instructions made the Sun King curse countless times in his heart. Fortunately, Anastrian was already a skeleton, and there was no expression to reveal. Finally, after 3 months, the Sun King's subordinate succeeded. Thus, the Horde began a merciless confrontation with the Alliance. The entire 27 years of the Dark Portal, all the way until the 29th year of the Dark Portal, the Horde and the Alliance basically spent all their time in various border military conflicts. Both sides deployed a large number of troops in the border area and built various fortresses. Everyone knew that the only reason Garush did not make a move was because he was afraid that Duque's departure was just a pretense. Finally, in the 29th year of the Dark Portal, because Jaina used the magic net to become a demigod, it caused the magic net to be disconnected for half a month. Garush finally confirmed that Duque was really not in Azeroth. On the 1st of April of the same year, the war between the Horde and the Alliance officially began. There was not even a declaration of war. Within a day, the Horde army divided into 3 routes to attack the Alliance's territory. On the northern front, 300,000 troops under the leadership of Varrock Salyafar, along with the Goblin Prince Garavix's mercenaries, attacked Grey Valley. On the southwestern front, Markolok led 200,000 orcs and King Jelen Gruul to attack the Feathermoon Fortress. On the eastern front, 500,000 orcs divided into 3 routes to attack Dust Wallow Swamp. General Nazgûran led the Horde's new navy to attack from the north to the south. Siege craftsman Helix Hesso led a division to attack Dust Wallow Swamp's northern barrier, which was now controlled by the Theramorians. Garush personally led the army to attack Dust Wallow Swamp. For a moment, both sides had millions of troops, and the bloodiest battle began on the mainland of Kalimdor. Chapter 1917. For the chief, for the tribe. Ah! Bang! Accompanied by a gunshot that sounded like it came from the sky, the orc captain who was still lecturing a second ago was shot in the head and laid dead on the ground. Ah! Captain! Captain is dead! The group of orc recruits panicked. 500 meters away, the sniper and observer who had completed their mission quietly put away their 98K sniper rifle. To make it easier, the sniper removed the suppressor and disappeared into the rocky mountain under the cover of the night. The orc hunting team that arrived 10 minutes later couldn't find anything. Impossible. They should be here. My warg can't smell anything. Damn, if only the trolls were here. The orcs missed the trolls a little. After all, they were the best hunters and trackers. 300 meters away, the sniper team that had just caused trouble was hiding in a camouflage net. They were surrounded by powder that specifically targeted wargs. The 2 people who were at a disadvantage suppressed their laughter until the orc hunting team left. They then started talking. "Boss, it's the 20th one," the observer said. "Yeah, did you see that guy's nameplate?" "Yeah. Boss will probably get promoted when we get back." "I don't want to get promoted. It's more fun to play sniper in the enemy's rear." The sniper smiled and showed a palm that was missing a middle finger. The calluses on his hand proved that he used to be an excellent archer. Normally, he would have retired a long time ago without a middle finger. He was worthless in the old army since he couldn't pull a bowstring. Here he could still be an excellent sniper. Hee boss, it's a pity that we can't snipe the enemy's officer." "Yeah. Centurions and above are all professionals. Unless they hit the throat or something. Last time, I sniped that guy's head 3 times and I couldn't even penetrate his skull. This scene was only a microcosm of the countless battles between the Alliance and the Horde. In the field of normal soldiers, the Alliance had the absolute advantage. With modern rifles, cannons, and other hot weapons in hand, dealing with tribal soldiers with axes and hammers was like cutting chives in a field. They could kill them however they wanted. Against professionals, the effect wasn't as obvious. If the Alliance did not send out professionals, they would often be hit directly by large-caliber cannons, or forcefully suppressed to death by more than one continuous fire cannon, such as 40mm octopus cannon, Bofors machine cannon, etc. Overall, apart from the especially conservative Night Elves, the Alliance had an absolute advantage on all fronts. And this was under the premise that the Alliance hadn't quickly mobilized their flying fleet over. That's right, the Alliance had purposely pulled back their flying fleet. This was common sense in modern military affairs. If there was enough strategic depth, no commander would place their elite troops on the front lines. On Earth before Duque transmigrated, the front lines were always the second-line troops. Because once they were bombarded by the enemy's cannons, the troops at the front would become cannon fodder. The elites would always hide in the back and only come out when the horn of counterattack was blown. On the continent of Kalimdor, the Alliance's flying fleet was deployed in Darnassus in the northwest, and in the southwest, in the depths of the Silithus Desert, which was guarded by insect swarms. Theramore had less than 200 old flying warships, which didn't have the upper hand against the Horde's air force. After all, in the past 3 years, the Horde had been smearing the walls, either by buying or stealing, and had gotten a lot of second-hand flying warships that had been eliminated by the Alliance. Although most of the equipment was removed during the elimination, they could still fight with some modifications. The Horde used 500 steam-powered flying warships to surround more than 200 Alliance warships. Sir, why can't we fight freely? The Horde's broken toys can be taken care of in one round. Sir, the soldiers below are generally complaining that it's too stifling. Sir, as the fleet commander, Admiral Taylor slammed the table. As a new officer in the Alliance, he was also quite ambitious. At the age of 38, he was in the prime of a commander's life. He wouldn't become slow because of old age, and he had more than 10 years of military experience. From Northrend to the Cataclysm, Taylor had been promoted from a small captain in Stormwind all the way to admiral, and he was deeply trusted by William. However, he didn't expect that William would actually give him such a difficult mission after the war had started. A week ago, William called for Taylor. As soon as Taylor entered the storm, he was surprised to see a few big shots of the Alliance. Apart from William, there was also Jaina, the Bronzebeard brothers, and Aurelia. Tyler, the Alliance has an arduous task for you, William said solemnly as soon as he started the conversation. I promise to complete the mission. Admiral Taylor stood at attention and puffed out his chest. Now, a week later, King regretted it. This mission was too head up. They could only lose, but not win. Furthermore, they had to win by making both sides pay a considerable price. The problem was that the Alliance was practically riding on their faces. How could they lose? In terms of military strength, the Alliance was currently the strongest in the southern continent, followed by the Rotterdam continent, and finally Kalimdor. The Night Elves and Draenei didn't develop modern air forces, so they could only pick the weakest from Rotterdam. Since the Dark Portal, Rotterdam had never been weak. Alterac was the wealthiest, and their warships were the best. Those 250-meter-long giant cannons with 460mm caliber main cannons were terrifying enough to scare people to death. The Storm Guardians had inherited the ferocious habit of the Mountain Knights during the Torrential Fortress era. They fought without any regard for their lives. Once they went up, they couldn't hope to come back. Either they completely destroyed their opponents, or they were completely destroyed. The Dalajan didn't play with technology. In the end, the Gilnea's air force was chosen just like that. In order to keep it a secret, the higher-ups didn't reveal that they were going to fake their defeat. Who knew that ever since they returned to the Alliance, the Gilneas would recover from the destruction brought about by the Cataclysm. They were also full of energy to prove themselves. Under the supervision of the old Alpha Wolf, Jean, the Gilnea's soldiers trained hard. As soon as the battle started, a volley of main cannons blasted 1/6 of the opponent's airship down. This was because the Gilneas didn't have money. Live ammunition was still rare, and they could only use the expired cannonballs produced by the Alliance to test fire. In the end, they only had a 23.6% hit rate for the target from 3,000 meters away. Otherwise, the wooden-hulled warships at the back would really be no match for the Alliance. What the hell was the opponent? The fleet didn't have the upper hand, and less than half of the cannons used TNT gunpowder. Many of the cannons didn't even have the brakes installed properly. When they fired, the deck of their own ship caved in. Chapter 1918. In the surveillance footage, Taylor actually saw old-fashioned black gunpowder cannons. What kind of cannon were they? Did they pull them out from a museum to make a joke? 3,000 meters. Sorry, it wasn't even the farthest range in theory. Quiet. Very quiet. After a short silence, every cannon position and bridge in the entire Alliance fleet burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. This is the main fleet of the Horde? Could it be a joke sent by the Horde circus? Actually, it was really difficult for the Horde. Brain-dead Howl knew nothing about flying warships. Garavex had no choice but to pull out a bunch of antiques to make up the numbers. Anyway, he had swindled them back, and they didn't cost him anything. The pilots were also unlucky people from the Alliance or mercenaries that he had gotten back through various means, such as lending money. Among the 666 warships, only 80 of them were newer diesel-powered flying warships. The rest were old steam-powered warships with wooden shells and thin iron sheets. As for training, it was even more tragic. The hit rate of the cannons at a distance of 5,000 meters was only 0.3%. The warships of the Gilneys weren't second-hand goods. They were the lowest-grade flying ships of the Alliance. Other than the 3 battleships, the entire fleet was made up of Cleveland-class cruisers and Benson-class destroyers. Cruisers and destroyers of this design were famous for being able to take a beating. There were many places that were hit by the cannons, but the losses weren't great. The casualties on each ship were in the single digits. Taylor broke out in a cold sweat. How could they still lose like this? General Taylor couldn't care less about his moral integrity anymore. He directly exercised the authority that William had given him and cursed in the secret communication circuit. Idiot! Why do you think it's so easy? The secret order that Commander Rin gave me is to lose. When the other side fires another round of cannons, I don't care how you do it. Set them on fire and make it look like a sacrificial explosion. But you can't really destroy the ships. Otherwise, I'll kill you bastards later. F***CK. This operation was simply amazing. If the captains of each ship hadn't heard Taylor's familiar roar, they would have thought that Taylor was giving fake orders. Actually, none of the captains were idiots. They had been wondering all along. Why did the Alliance have so many elite soldiers? Why did it have to be their turn to fight? If it was just a training exercise, they could just charge over directly. Although there was a unified command in the Alliance, everyone knew that the Air Force was basically formed independently. The dwarves and gnomes were the strongest in the air. The Zap Thrower fleet that they formed had blinded the entire army during the Alliance's military exercise in the Twilight Highlands last year with a hit rate of 41.3% from 5,000 meters away. Then there was Stormwind's 7th Fleet and Kultiraz's Ice Queen fleet. The two were basically equal. The third tier was Lordaeron and Alterac. The fourth tier consisted of small countries like Stromgarde and Gilneas. If the Alliance wanted to feign defeat, then it made sense. The Alliance had recently transferred many troops into Theramore, but none of them were the main force. Apart from a small number of Alliance soldiers, most of them were mercenaries hired from the Hot Sand Group, a total of 150,000 people. Speaking of which, when did the Alliance become so weak that they had to rely on mercenaries to defend their cities? Even those Alliance soldiers looked like small-town guards from some remote corner of the world. Their discipline was lax and they did not behave properly. They were clearly ruffians. Now, the bad thing was that his Gilneas flying fleet was too outstanding. Thus, the entire fleet was in an uproar. F***CK. So the higher-ups wanted us to feign defeat. Quick, take out the blankets for sleeping. After the next round of bombardment, immediately set the blankets on fire. Aren't there still samples of gunpowder in the warehouse? Get ready. After the next round of bombardment, throw it at the thickest part of the deck and blow it up. Prepare to set it on fire. Tell those idiots to be careful and not burn themselves. Cannoneers, pay attention. Use your damn cannons. Those who are not confident, shoot the cannonballs into the sea. A few minutes later, when the Horde fleet approached the Alliance fleet at high speed under the pressure of their commander and opened fire again, they suddenly realized that everything had changed. It was as if the Alliance fleet did not know how to fight anymore. The cannons rumbled, and only a few Horde airships were actually hit. Although one shot would cause them to explode, turning them into garbage falling from the sky and into the sea. The scene was terrifying, but the losses were acceptable. On the Alliance side, dozens of warships shot out fireballs. The raging fire could not be hidden from anyone. The happiest thing was that one of the Alliance's main warships that was at least 200 meters long exploded violently. The black pillar of smoke that shot into the sky caused the entire Horde fleet to rejoice. Ha ha ha! We hit it! Did we hit the ammunition compartment and cause it to explode? Most likely. On the bridge of the Horde fleet, the Gnomes and the Forsaken cheered together. On the Alliance side, General Taylor was suspicious. Hey, Fuse. Did something really happen to them? The burly man called Fuse laughed foolishly in the video. Haha, it's fine. The lads have been complaining about the previous generation of reconnaissance planes on our new warships, so we blew up the auspicious cloud. Anyway, our bulletproof cabin is pretty good, isn't it? Make it more realistic. That's what you asked for. F***CK. General Taylor's face darkened. He blew up a plane that he looked down on. What kind of **T was that? After hanging up, Fuse changed his expression and said, "You little bastards, you can't blow up the cannon even if you don't want to use the old 356mm main cannon. Isn't it easy to change the cannon turrets? We are envious of the 460mm main cannon of Alterac. Our ship's hull can take it too. At least change to a 400mm main cannon. It was damaged on duty anyway. The Alliance would reimburse it." Soon, Fuse controlled the battleship Maersk to perform a thrilling crash. The left rudder was 15 degrees. The right rudder was 31 degrees. It dragged a long trail of black smoke as it swayed and crashed into the Theramore military port diagonally behind. It landed steadily on the dock. Then the veterans on the ship started to play mahjong. This battle was named the Battle of Theramore. The Horde lost 437 warships, and the Alliance lost more than half of their warships. On the surface there were 132 warships, but in reality there were no warships that crashed and 81 casualties. After weakening the Alliance's air force, the Horde finally used their ultimate weapon 3 days later. It was a desperate charge by hundreds of flying warships, all for the sake of covering a warship that was concealed by wind magic and illusions in the sky. On that battleship, a magic bomb that shocked both the Alliance and the Horde was dropped, focusing Rainbow. Chapter 1919. Emergency Broadcast. Emergency Broadcast. Just 10 minutes ago, the cruel and bloody Horde used weapons of mass destruction to launch an inhumane and destructive attack on the Alliance's Theramore harbor on the Kalimdor continent. In every capital, every town, every military camp, and every magic mirror, the familiar official broadcaster of the Alliance, Sally Whitemane, appeared in front of everyone. With Sally's promotion to one of the bishops of the Church of Holy Light, she rarely appeared in such broadcasts. Only extremely important events required Sally to appear in person. In a sense, she was already one of the symbols of the Alliance. The last time she appeared, it was to announce that Xueqi was temporarily stepping down from his position as the supreme commander of the Alliance to pursue the path of a true god. This time, she announced the bad news of Theramore's destruction in a vivid voice. 200,000 troops, annihilated in an instant. Theramore's defending general, Lieutenant General Grunt Macedon, died in the line of duty. On the screen, under the crushing of the huge blue and purple light, Jaina's mage tower bore the brunt of it. She stepped on the brilliant white glow, trying to resist the dazzling light that fell from the sky. Unfortunately, the mage tower failed and collapsed into dozens of pieces on the spot. The magnificent outer walls of the mage tower were like leaves blown away in a storm, exploding everywhere. The towering walls of Theramore were like castles made of sand on a beach, crushed into powder in the blink of an eye. Countless tanks and cannons were suddenly kneaded like dough, twisted and deformed under the huge explosion. The soldiers who fled in panic, crying and in despair, the lucky ones directly turned into ashes, while the unlucky ones on the periphery became human-shaped torches, struggling for more than 10 seconds before dying in screams. Every Alliance member was so shocked that they couldn't say a word. From New Silvermoon City to Lordaeron City to Iron Furnace Fort to Stormwind City, every member of the Alliance who witnessed this scene was silent. If they didn't perish in silence, they would explode in silence. The Alliance. Since its establishment, It had never surrendered to any organization. No one would forget that the alliance was established to resist the vicious and cruel old horde. After 10 seconds of silence, the soldiers and citizens of the alliance erupted with the greatest anger they had ever experienced. Punish the murderers. They wanted to kill us all 30 years ago. They should have destroyed the horde long ago. War. We need an all-out war. Destroy this cruel race. Counterattack. Where is our fleet? Where are our soldiers? Kill the orcs. Kill. 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 The emotions of the crowd were surging. After receiving the news, the alliance reacted intensely. Tens of millions of people surged onto the streets. They held all sorts of banners and shouted angrily, scolding the alliance higher-ups for not doing anything. An hour later, the throne meeting in Stormwind City's storm fortress was silent. The magic mirror was full of angry crowds from all over the world. In the middle of the throne room, there was a large pile of letters requesting for battle. The speed at which the number of letters was increasing exponentially, and the herald was simply too busy to deal with them. Tyrion Fordring was the first to speak, his face livid. After being told of Ceremos's plan, he was the angriest. This is too despicable. What is this? This was what Xueqi used to call entrapment enforcement. I've seen the most cunning humans, but I've also seen the most just orcs. I didn't expect that the most cunning human to be my colleague for almost 30 years. Tyrion roared and waved his fist. In the end, he didn't hide the fact that he had given the mass-produced focusing rainbow to the horde from the higher-ups. Jaina said coldly, Tyrion, you can't deny it. Even if we let Garush steal the focusing rainbow, Garush would still be the one to carry out the plan. If he was a good person, he could have used these things as bargaining chips instead of throwing them directly into the Alliance's cities. But Tyrion still wanted to say something. William slapped the armrest. Enough. The just orc Eitrig you speak of has already been killed by that brainless lunatic Garush as a traitor. Even his head has been hanging at the gates of Orgrimmar for a whole week. Believe it or not, even if you gave that brainless fool a loaded gun to his head to win his trust, he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. In this life, the incident of letting the veteran orc Eitrig go did not happen to Tyrion. But fate was wonderful. Later, the two of them got to know each other through the cooperation between the Alliance and the Horde. Tyrion respected Eitrig's character. Tyrion was silent for a moment. Both Jaina and William had an unforgettable hatred for the orcs. Under Xueqi's suppression, being able to endure until now was already a sign of maturity. Tyrion was still a little unwilling. But there's still Thrall. Thrall isn't the chief now, Muradin said coldly. That brainless fool has been in charge of the Horde for almost 4 years. Thrall didn't even fart when he came back. Aurelia also spoke up. The Burning Legion will come again. We don't have much time. This is the last chance to get rid of the Horde and prevent the Horde from dragging us down again. Irian said, the orcs are a barbarian race that can't coexist peacefully. As long as someone provokes them, or a fighter comes to power, they will become extremely aggressive. The Draenei race was almost wiped out here. The human race was almost wiped out here as well. Do you want to wait for the Horde to become strong one day and slaughter all the races of the Alliance before you are satisfied? The topic had unknowingly reached the height of the race. Tyrion was a noble man and not a racist, but in the face of such a big issue, he could only remain silent. William made a decision. In the name of the acting commander-in-chief of the Alliance, I announce that in the name of the Alliance's acting commander-in-chief, a throne vote will be held on the motion of launching an all-out war against the Horde to destroy all the tribes and leave no survivors. As usual, the minority obeys the majority. Affiliated organizations of the Alliance, such as the Silver Hand, the Silver Dawn, the Naga, and the Murlocs, did not have the right to vote. There was no suspense or surprise. It was passed unanimously. Even Queen Kalia, whom Tyrion respected the most, voted in favor of it without hesitation. At this moment, Tyrion's eyes dimmed. Of course, he knew that this meant that the 2 million orcs were finished. Jaina couldn't bear to see the noble paladin so discouraged, so she added, the Alliance is not a butcher organization. What we want to destroy is only hostile organizations that are harmful to the world and the Alliance. We have never said that we want to exterminate a race. Look, even the Kiraj insect people and the Naga tribe, who were once hostile to the Alliance, are now sitting in the Alliance's gallery. In the future, as long as they make enough contributions, the Alliance will also promote their status. Chapter 1920. What else could Tyrion say? He could only nod dejectedly. In his mind, most of the members of the tribe had been deceived by Gurus, and did not deserve to die. This was the difference between the minds of the clergy and most of the rulers. It had to be admitted that the high pure who believed in the holy light could not represent everyone. In this world, the evil and the good were the minority. Perhaps some people admired the holiness of the high pure and envied the freedom of the great demon king, but not many could do that. After all, the world was ruled by mortals. This was also the reason why most religious armed forces did not have a good ending, both in ancient and modern times. Either the royal power overrode the divine power, and the divine power became an ornament, or the divine power controlled the royal power, and the royal power always secretly resisted. The decision of the throne conference was made public 6 hours after Theramore was destroyed by the magic bomb. In the magic mirror, Sally Whitemane's pretty face was full of frost as she sat upright. A few days ago, the Alliance launched the war in advance without a declaration of war. At first, the Alliance showed restraint, hoping to confirm through diplomatic channels whether this was an individual act or an all-out war initiated by the tribe. However, the great chief of the tribe, Gurus Hellscream, firmly ignored it. 6 hours ago, the tribe used the treasure-focusing rainbow stolen from the Blue Dragon army to create a terrible magic bomb and used the cruelest method to destroy the Alliance's commercial port, Theramore, on the Kalimdor continent. It was originally used for trading with the tribe. 30 years ago, millions of orcs launched the first War of the Dark Portal and destroyed all of Stormwind. The second War of the Dark Portal swept through the entire Eastern Kingdom. Nearly 10 countries were captured and their territories were ravaged. Tens of millions of people were killed or injured, and tens of millions were displaced. At this time, the middle-aged and old people listening in front of the magic mirror, no matter men or women, unconsciously clenched their teeth and fists. 5 years after the War of the Dark Portal, Nazul, as the great chief of the tribe, once again led the tribe through the Dark Portal. They were all wiped out by the brave soldiers of the watchtower near the Dark Portal. Even though the old Rotterdam kingdom once turned more than 100,000 orcs into slaves, and used the uncivilized method of slavery to dominate the orcs, that was not enough for the orcs to shout, "Orcs will never be slaves," and glorify themselves as victims. Under the threat of the Scourge army, who was the enemy of all living beings, the Alliance commander at that time, Duke Marcus, gave up on hunting down the orcs with the utmost kindness. He put aside his past grudges and joined forces to deal with the Scourge army. We even lent them ships to cross the endless sea and reach the new continent, Kalimdor, to start a new life. Speaking up to hear, Sally's tone suddenly became stern, her beautiful eyebrows raised coldly. But how did the tribe treat our alliance? The Horde trampled on the goodwill of the Alliance with the greatest cruelty. Their target was very clear. They wanted to be like their fathers and start a war to wipe out the Alliance. They want to destroy our civilization and kill all humans, dwarves, gnomes, blood elves, night elves, Draenei, Naga, Karaji insect people, Murlocs and other vassal races. Unknowingly, all the people of the Alliance started to show their veins and gnash their teeth. All the leaders of the Alliance, after an emergency discussion at the throne conference, finally unanimously passed the resolution of waging a full-scale war against the Horde. All active soldiers and reservists who are on leave are to immediately cancel their leave and report to the nearest military station. The Alliance has officially expanded the scope of reservists and plans to recruit 3 million reservists. At the same time, all adult men above the age of 16 and below the age of 50 must undergo military training 3 times a week, each time not less than 2 hours. Girls of the same age who voluntarily accept military training will receive special subsidies from the Alliance. For details, please consult the local Civil Affairs Department. There were still many announcements from the Alliance. For most of the people, the previous ones were already enough. There were originally less than a third of the rational and wait-and-see factions, but this time, it was completely ignited. Because this was a huge explosion of new and old hatred. When the news spread, it was already past 5 in the evening. The recruitment offices of the Alliance, which were already bustling with noise, suddenly exploded. In Stormwind, the recruitment offices of small cities like Goldflash City and East Valley Lumberyard, which were now upgraded to small cities, the lines of people were as long as 500 meters. And in places like Stormwind City, Rapids Fort, Alterac, Silvermoon City, and Iron Furnace Fort, which had been ravaged by the orcs in the past, it was even more exaggerated. 5 lines of people lined up 5 kilometers away. Just like that, the lines of people occupied the streets and alleys of such a large city. Even though it had clearly affected many shops and pedestrians, everyone was extremely understanding. Because every pair of eyes was bright and full of vigor, with the blazing flames of revenge. They were silent. No one made any noise. At most, they would do their best to lower their voices and whisper. They all knew how their current comfortable life came about. They also knew that the Alliance army did not want unorganized and undisciplined hooligans. Every young man displayed their firm will to the world with such a face. Among the people in the queue, there was no lack of middle-aged men with gray temples. They stood straighter and straighter than those young men. With one look, it was obvious that they were once retired soldiers. The tribal invasion in the first year of the Dark Portal had caused the deaths of tens of millions of humans, dwarves, and elves. The pain of the previous generation was still imprinted in the deepest depths of the souls of the older generation. Silence did not mean that they were forgotten. Even for the shortest-lived humans, 25 years was not enough for this group of people to all grow old and die. The soldiers who had fought on the front lines 29 years ago had now become the pillars of the entire alliance. Those who still remained in the Alliance army were at least colonels. Those who left the Alliance army, under the military conversion system set up by Xueqi, received almost free decommissioned ships, and often had a higher starting point than others. For example, retired colonels and lieutenants could receive different grades of ships according to their military ranks for traveling business without mortgage. At the same time, the ship could be repaid interest-free in installments ranging from 5 to 10 years. In addition, there was also insurance. If the ship really sank in an accident, there was no need to pay. And the veterans who were disabled in the war also received enough social security. They would be assigned to various places. They would either be taught knowledge and culture and then join the civil affairs department or become a local patrol. Children who lost their fathers or even their mothers in the war would receive a high monthly subsidy that was enough for their daily needs. Chapter 1921. Orphans would be placed in foster care with qualified families, usually military families, according to the War Orphan Act signed by Xueqi until they were 16 years old. All living expenses and tuition fees were free. Families that adopted war orphans would also have special allowances. There were civil officials who were also veterans who would check on the orphans' growth monthly. It was precisely because they had experienced similar situations around them that those veterans absolutely could not tolerate the abuse of war orphans. In addition, the Alliance would impose the most severe sanctions on corruption and embezzlement of pensions. The Alliance's reputation in this regard was supreme. Alliance soldiers were blessed and treated well, even after retirement. This made joining the army the top choice for the youth of the Alliance. Not to mention that the Alliance had a righteous cause in every war. In addition, after the attack on Northrend, the expansion of territory and the increase in resources, all of which were preferential to the military. This made everyone in the Alliance proud to join the army. If it wasn't for Xueqi strictly controlling the number of people joining the army over the years, the total number of active soldiers in the Alliance would have already exceeded 10 million. Soldiers didn't do production. They were purely professionals who needed to be supported by money from other places. The peasant soldiers in the Middle Ages of Europe on Earth had been proven to be useless countless times. A few well-trained knights were able to chase thousands of peasant soldiers around like ducks in a rout. Unless it was on the verge of extinction, no matter how harsh the war was, the proportion of professional soldiers shouldn't exceed 1/10 of the total population. Generally speaking, 1% was the most appropriate proportion. In modern times, there were very few countries with more than 5 million regular troops. Even if there were more than 1 billion people in the Great Celestial Empire, the number of soldiers was still in the millions. As for the militia and reserve soldiers who had received military training but didn't need to pay for the army, that was another matter. Xueqi used this method to avoid the huge burden of unlimited military expenditure and set up a conscription echelon for the Alliance. Once there weren't enough active soldiers, there would immediately be strictly trained reserve soldiers to replace them. The only difference between them and the active soldiers was often combat experience. In fact, many of them were generals who had been transferred from active duty to reserve duty, so even this could be saved. Under the reserve duty, there were also tens of millions of people who had received basic combat training. The series of measures had been carried out for more than a decade. Once the Alliance entered a state of war, the energy released by this war machine would immediately become quite terrifying. Even the leaders of the Throne Conference were shocked by this scene. Not to mention Sal. Thrall, who had been hiding in the Ring of Earth for the past few years, was the last to know about this. When he received the news from the night elf druid from the Alliance, it was already the evening of the second day. Sal, who was greatly shocked, immediately persuaded Hamuel Rune Totem to help him ask Malfurion to intercede. The great druid was a complete nature protector. At the same time, he represented the Cenarian Circle and listened to the throne meeting. Malfurion was not surprised by Sal's arrival, but he was not tempted by Sal's proposal to stop the war between the Alliance and the Horde. Sal, I acknowledge your and the Tauren's efforts in healing the scars of the Earth. In fact, the people of the Earthring were equal to the siblings of the Cenarian Circle. However, I suggest that you stay out of this matter. But, before Sal could finish, he was interrupted by Malfurion. No need for buts. You were the one who gave up the position of Great Chief to Garush. Now he is acting. He is using the power of the Great Chief to let Varrock Seraphar attack Grey Valley. The first thing they did when they attacked was to set fire. Now 1/5 of Grey Valley is in a forest fire. And he destroyed Theramore with Focusing Rainbow. This is beyond the scope of a conventional war. Even if Garush steps down, he will not be spared. Malfurion said very straightforwardly what many politicians would not say in public. He was a leader and a great druid with a merciful heart. This was the biggest reason why Sal could hear the truth. Sal felt like the sky was falling. As a former great chief, he was the orc who knew the strength of the Alliance best. When the Alliance's war machine started, it could crush the Horde in minutes. Sal walked away in a daze, muttering to himself, "That idiot Garush actually gave the Alliance such an excuse for war." Sal hurriedly used the portal in Darnassus and immediately rushed to the political center of the Alliance, Stormwind City, where the Alliance commander Varian Rin was. He was splashed with cold water. Commander Rin knows of your arrival. He refuses to meet you. But as an old friend of the Alliance, the commander believes that it is necessary to protect your personal safety in the Alliance. He will send a team of guards for you. Sal wanted to say that he did not need guards, but he saw the eyes of the soldiers and the people. Even if he wore the badge of a diplomatic envoy, in theory, the Alliance would not attack him. But those pairs of eyes full of hatred and hostility made his heart palpitate. He had no doubt that if he dared to take off the badge, even if they knew that they were no match for him, the entire Stormwind City would launch a suicidal attack on him. Sal turned to look for Jaina in the new city of Kultiras, south of Stranglethorn Vale. Unsurprisingly, Jaina did not meet him. She only asked Egwene to bring a message to Sal. This is the second time, there will never be a third time. Strictly speaking, the Horde had declared war on the Alliance twice in this life. Unlike in history, where there were no foreign enemies, they would stab each other, and when there were foreign enemies, they would join forces. In this life, the war between the two sides was more cautious. Either they did not fight, or they fought a real full-scale war. Sal was very depressed. The Alliance still respected him, but the leaders of the Alliance also had a reason not to see him. Sal was not qualified. Sal was no longer a great chief, not even a chief or the absolute leader of a large organization. The attitude of Varian and Jaina was the attitude of the entire Alliance Throne Council. The two deputy commanders who were the leaders refused to see him, and as long as they were mature politicians, they would never contact Sal in private. After all, Sal was still a green-skinned orc. Sal was a little disappointed, but not desperate. He used the Alliance portal and went directly to Hagaro Island in Stranglethorn Vale to find Wajin. Chapter 1922. Woken seemed to be in good spirits. Sal noticed that Woken was still in the mood to carve his fangs. "Old friend, I'm so happy to see you in good spirits." "Me too." Woken gave Sal an affectionate hug. Sal went straight to the point and said, "We can't let the war between the Horde and the Alliance break out. I'm going to start the Makora and challenge Garush. I had to stop Garush before he made a bigger mistake. I hope you can come back and help me after I take charge of the Horde again." To Sal's surprise, Woken didn't agree immediately. Instead, he showed a sad expression. "Sal, times have changed." Woken, you." "Sal, have you seriously looked at the cities of the Alliance?" Sal was shocked and didn't know what to say. After a long time, he replied in a deep voice. "I have. But I was too anxious this time and didn't look carefully." Woken asked, "Have you seen the Alliance 15 years ago? Or the Alliance today? Even if you take back the throne of the Great Chief, can you stop 2 million orcs who are eager to fight, expand their territory, and get more resources?" Sal's heart beat violently. He realized what Woken wanted to say. He was still unwilling to give up. He gritted his teeth, looked up and stared at Woken. It was my mistake to give the position of Great Chief to Garrush. Now that he is leading the horde to the edge of a dangerous cliff, I can't make the same mistake again. Woken didn't answer directly. Instead, he continued to speak. The Alliance is very good to the Darkspear Trolls. They also promised that as long as the Darkspear Trolls want to leave, they can go anywhere outside the Alliance's territory at any time. Generally speaking, the Darkspear Trolls are not allowed to leave their territory, but I applied to visit the Alliance, and William approved. He sent paladins to protect me, just to prevent the aggressive Blood Elves from attacking me. In the past 3 years, I have been to many places in the Alliance. That is a treatment that I have never enjoyed as a chief of a backward civilization, as a horde person. I went to the Alliance's Stormwind City, to the Iron Furnace Fort, and other than the unpopular Silvermoon City, I have been to all the Alliance's main cities and over 100 Alliance towns. I have come to a conclusion. The Alliance has completely pulled away from the horde. When tribal warriors were still using iron axes and wearing iron armor, a 12-year-old human boy had already learned how to use a rifle in the military training that was popularized in both urban and rural areas. He shot an orc silhouette target in the chest from 30 meters away. Even a small village with only 500 people has 3 well-maintained steam tanks as local armed forces. Even the patrolling militias are professionals. If I take the Alliance's airship, I can travel 600 kilometers in a day and a night. As for the cost, it was only the price that a farmer could earn after working for 3 days. On the spaceship, I saw the most ordinary farmers, but also the most luxuriously dressed upper-class people. The only people who are privileged are the soldiers. Although I haven't seen any soldiers who abuse their privileges, the people respect them from the bottom of their hearts. Sal, you and Duque went on stage at the same time. It took you almost 10 years to win a vast territory for the Horde, but you couldn't sublimate the orcs or even the entire Horde from the simple Iron Age to a stronger civilized race. It took Duque the same time, but he has evolved the Alliance into a powerful civilization that has separated itself from the Earth. Will such a powerful alliance allow the backward Horde to continue to exist and continue to occupy vast territories and resources? No, it won't. It's like we can't allow the barbaric centaurs to continue to exist in Duroder. It's like we can't stand the boars continuing to occupy the barren land. The Alliance and the Horde will eventually fight. This time, it's just that your choice of Garrush gave the Alliance a huge excuse. Even if you take action against Garrush and overthrow him before the Alliance, so what? Do you think Duke Marcus is a true saint? At this point, Woking opened his arms and raised them diagonally to the sky. He opened his mouth wide and let out a roar that deeply shocked Sal's heart. Don't get it wrong. He's a Stormwind person. The people of Stormwind were the ones who suffered the most from the orcs. Go and ask Orgrim. When the orcs swept through the elven forest in Stormwind, what did the orcs do? They robbed all the human villages and even refused the humans' pleas for mercy and surrender. They killed all the humans regardless of gender or age, just like they did to the Dreenii. When Stormwind counterattacked the elven forest, there were no captives either. The ones you rescued from Goldenhold Castle were all captives of another army. The Lordaeron people. Duke Marcus is a Stormwind person. The current leader of the Alliance, Varian Rin, is the king of Stormwind. He saw his father killed by an orc assassin with his own eyes. Tell me, Sal, if there's a chance, will they let the Horde go just like that? Now the Alliance has no foreign enemies. They have no scruples. This is the best time for the Alliance to destroy the Horde. Do you understand what I'm saying? Sal? Woken grabbed Sal's arms, which were thicker than his own, and shook Sal, who was already a little scared out of his wits. Sal was dazed for a moment. He seemed to see millions of orcs being slaughtered. Everything that the orcs' fathers had done to the Alliance would be reversed. He shuddered, and he could feel the cold sweat on his back soaking through his clothes. Call the orcs to resist to the end? Would that be useful? From the ground to the air, and then to the sea, the form of war had changed dramatically. A hot-blooded and brainless charge would only lead to inevitable death. Even if professionals could withstand bullets, could they withstand cannonballs? The top professionals could even use cannonballs as a kind of flying equipment. How many professionals of this level were there? Most of the races were composed of mortals. The Horde attached great importance to the cultivation of professionals, but it was only at the level of 1 in 10 mortals. Among this group of professionals, More than 90% were low-level professionals who could not withstand guns and cannons with their bodies. The group of professionals was like a pyramid. The more powerful the profession, the fewer the number. If the Alliance gained an absolute advantage in the mortal realm and slaughtered the mortal soldiers of the Horde, then only a small group of high-end professionals would not be able to make any waves. If they fought the Alliance to the end, there was no doubt that they would be completely destroyed. Sal suddenly fell into a painful dilemma. Chapter 1923. No matter what choice Thrall made, once the war machine was started, it would be like a rolling wheel of history. It would never stop until it crushed something important. The funny thing was that after Brainless Roar blew up Theramore, his whole body suddenly swelled up and floated. Ha ha ha. Well done, Anastrian, as long as you blow up Naxxramas and Dalajan of the Alliance. Then blow up the hateful Stormwind City, Iron Stove Fort, Lordaeron City, and Darnassus. The Alliance will be finished. Brainless Roar patted the Sun King's shoulder hard. Please forgive me for being blunt, but the Alliance has more powerful cities than these. I carefully examined the power. One focusing rainbow is only enough to destroy a relatively small city like Theramore. If it was a big city like Stormwind City, we would need at least 3. The Sun King was also telling the truth. Then let's get more focusing rainbow. His words made the eyes of the people around him twitch. Was focusing rainbow so easy to get? If the Dragon Sleep Temple found out that the tribe had stolen this batch of focusing rainbow, then it would be big trouble. Although the dragons had experienced many disasters, the Dragon Sleep Temple still had at least the combat power of over 10,000 adult dragons. If the dragons came out in full force and attacked the tribe's current air force would never be able to hold them off. Magatha Grimtotem also said, "We can confuse the Alliance's vision and tell them that we have at least 1,000 of these magic bombs. We can use this to threaten the Alliance to admit defeat, issue a surrender declaration, and cede all the land on the Kalimdor continent to our tribe." This cow's words had to be said. Quite the essence of a terrorist. It was just that she didn't know 2 things. First, any mature securities would not compromise with terrorists, at least not publicly. Second, focusing rainbow was a disguised gift from the Alliance to the tribe to play. At this time, the messenger suddenly asked for an audience and shouted as soon as he came in. "Not good, the Alliance is attacking. They have launched an attack on all of our territories." Gurus was displeased. Bull**T. I don't want general terms like, all. Don't tell me that the Alliance has the ability to attack every one of our settlements. Of course, the messenger knew that his boss was an impatient person. He was also afraid that his boss would beat the **T out of him. So he immediately opened the report. Written on it were the names of the towns and troops that had been attacked. This included all the tribe's armies and the towns controlled by the tribes. On the northern front, the Northern Army led by Varrock Salyafar was besieged by the allied forces of the Night Elves and humans. The Alliance fleet from the hinterlands began to clear the area. Tens of thousands of tons of explosives bombarded Varrock's army again and again. In order to reduce the obstacles, Varrock followed Garusha's orders and set fire to the forest, which in turn became a death knell for the Horde. The 460mm super-large caliber naval cannon fired at close range at a distance of 3 kilometers from the tribe. A single cannonball with a 660-pound, 300 kilograms, charge would be enough to kill all humans and animals within a 50-meter radius. Those who were further away were bleeding from their ears, nose, and eyes. If they didn't die, they would be crippled. Later, the Alliance found that large-caliber artillery shells were too wasteful, so they switched to flying destroyers to provide cover and used bombers that looked like big-bellied fish to carry out carpet bombing. It was not that the Horde did not try to fight back, but unfortunately, the few wooden flying warships and wyverns arrived late. Soon after they arrived in the combat airspace, they were shot by the Alliance's destroyers, exploding into fireballs and dirty flesh falling from the sky. The Alliance directly used the cruel reality to teach the Horde a lesson. In modern warfare, there was no initiative without air superiority. An army of 300,000 was reduced to ashes in a single morning. Only Varrock Salyafar was spared. And this was because he had been hit by a large-caliber cannon, yet he was still alive. He was saved by the orcs who rushed over and sent away in advance. In the Stornedalen mountain, the well-prepared Galavix built his goblin base camp, the Rusty Water City, into the belly of the mountain. Unfortunately, he was prepared to deal with the Alliance's air attack. He did not realize that the alliance was already ahead of the horde in all aspects. In the dark rusty water city, the goblins suddenly heard a rumbling sound from the mountain wall. What's that sound? It seems to be coming from the underground? Soon, the rusty water goblins got the answer. That was the dozens of huge earth-drilling bugs that burst out from the depths of the ground. Oro's children. Oro's heirs, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws in a frightening manner, did not indulge in the thrill of slaughter. After breaking through the walls of this underground kingdom, they retreated. A few minutes later, tens of thousands of Karaji Bugman warriors drilled out of every dark hole. Of course, in the eyes of the goblins, they were aliens. The Bugmen followed the orders of the Karaji twin emperors, who were resurrected by Xueqi before he left, and launched a devastating offensive against the rusty water goblins. At this moment, the Prince of Trade Galavix, who was in Orgrimmar, did not know about it until his nest was completely raided. He was distressed by the fact that his wealth was robbed and his slaves died. He fainted on the spot. On the western front, in the desolate land, the settlements and sentry posts of the horde were all uprooted by air firepower. The Golans, who regarded this place as their territory, were very strong. Each Golan had the strength to fight with an adult dragon. The black dragon's corpse on the Blade Peak mountain in the Outer Realm was the masterpiece of their boss, Gruul. So what? The dragon breath of an adult dragon rarely had a range of more than 100 meters. Dragon breath was the longest range attack of most dragons. After all, dragons who were proficient in magic like Krasis were rare. In the face of a dragon's attack, Golans could throw a big stone and smash the dragon from the sky. But Golans had no way to deal with the Alliance fleet that directly fired from a height of 1,000 meters. Their huge size meant that it was difficult for them to find a cave to hide in. The Alliance gunner in the sky laughed. Ha ha ha. It's as easy as hunting. Stop talking nonsense, use armor-piercing bullets, don't use high-explosive bullets, and fight them like tanks. Golans, who once dominated a region, were harvested without any ability to resist. And their boss, Gruul, who was attacking the Feathermoon Fortress, encountered opponents of the same level for the first time, and there were 6 of them in one go. All of them were the famous gods of the wilderness in the history of Azeroth. The bear brothers User and Usoc, the wolf king Goldrin, the crow god Iwina, the turtle god Tortola, and the demigod Cenarius. In front of them, the strong Gruul could only die with a grievance. Chapter 1924. In the city of New Kultiras in Hidden Treasure Bay, Jaina finished a hard day of work and returned to her mage tower. With a wave of her hand, she opened a magic mirror and said a sentence. Gruul is dead. Well, as expected. Jaina gently flipped her brilliant blonde hair, then deliberately squeezed her magic twin peaks. Xueqi, when are you coming back? What seemed like an understatement was a shocking fact. Yes, that's right. In the magic mirror, the person who was talking to Jaina was none other than Duke. Ahem. My good disciple, you're not being good. Let me tell you, flirt. Get F***ked. The master and disciple said the second half of the sentence at the same time. Jaina gave Xueqi a provocative look, wantonly showing off her beautiful curves in front of Xueqi. Then come back. I'm almost done here. I've collected about 3/4 of the timeline. I can use brute force to push the rest, but it's a bit rough. Withdrawing her smile, Jaina said seriously, Xueqi, we all miss you. Although everything is fine without you, it always feels like something is missing. Xueqi sighed. I'll try my best. If I'm fast, according to the time on your side, I'll be back in about a month. Just in time to finish. Well, this is the best news I've heard in 3 years. As a small reward, I'll give you a dance. Jaina's smiling face was charming. She raised her hand, and an ice pipe appeared out of thin air in the center of the image. Her elemental control was so pure that there were no edges or burrs on the pipe. It was like a smooth pipe that had been finely processed in a steel mill. Jaina danced around the pipe, making Xueqi's mouth dry. Humph. Little hussy, you're going to die. Xueqi made a declaration like a defeated dog. Humph. I'll be waiting. Jaina patted her perky buttocks in protest. Then the two turned off the communication. The war between the Alliance and the Horde was completely one-sided. Especially when Gruul's huge head was hung on the bow of the Bismarck. It naturally caused panic in the tribe. Out of fear, a large number of tribesmen abandoned their homes and began a long journey towards the only safe place in their hearts, Orgrimmar. Why do I feel that Gruul is very weak? William was a little puzzled during the throne conference. Jaina replied calmly, "It's not that he's weak, it's that the entire world of Azeroth has become stronger. According to Xueqi, the world will has sensed the danger and started to release more of the planet's energy that we don't understand. This energy can unlock the shackles of our combat power, allowing the local powerhouses to advance to a higher level." Vashj continued, "Well, I was also curious at first. Why did Xueqi want me to swear allegiance to the planet and swear to become a demigod directly under the planet? Now that I know, I can feel my strength increasing every day, though very little. This is not the result of cultivation. It's purely a gift from the planet." William understood. Although Gruul has the body of a demigod, he has always had no intention of serving Azeroth, so his strength has not increased? Yes. If Xueqi was here, he might say, "Gruul, you're a level 70 boss, and you still want to talk nonsense in a level 90 environment? You're already giving face by not finding someone to kill you alone. Don't you know how much you're worth?" This, he really didn't. So Gruul died. Yes, the people below asked, "What should we do with the women and children who are trying to evacuate?" Kalia asked. There was silence in the throne conference. It was William who spoke first. 25 years ago, our fathers didn't kill all these green-skinned bastards. That's the biggest mistake. Are we going to let these bastards live for another 15 years and declare war on the Alliance for the third time? Obviously, the violent side of him that he inherited from the wolf god Goldring had flared up. What he said was the truth, but it was against the teachings of the Holy Light. Jaina suddenly said, "Let them go to Orgrim. The Alliance is always an organization that fights against evil. There's no need to tarnish the glory of the Alliance on this matter. Moreover, a large number of refugees can easily destroy the fragile food reserves of the tribe." Wait. What if that brainless Garrosh orders the massacre of orc civilians, triggers an uprising, and then is overthrown? Won't this war be lost? Muradin muttered. The lifespan of dwarves was much longer than that of humans. 29 years was far from the next generation. Iron Furnace Castle and Loch Moden were the places that were the most severely ravaged by the orcs. For most dwarves, it was still fresh in their memories. The dwarves didn't want to stop the war. "Don't worry," Jaina said confidently. "Very soon, an opportunity will appear. Garrosh will definitely take the risk out of desperation." At this moment, Jurbin jumped up. "Hey, wait. It's not your style to speak like a charlatan. Lady Marcus." Normally, in Azeroth, the human custom was to follow her husband's surname when married. However, the status of the four queens was special, and Xueqi didn't care, so he was allowed to keep his surname. When the great craftsman Jurbin pointed out Jaina's surname, it was obvious that he was referring to Xueqi. Facing the passionate gazes of her sisters, Jaina couldn't resist and raised her hands in surrender. "All right, I admit that I've contacted Xueqi. He'll be back soon, probably in a month's time. That's his arrangement." There was a burst of laughter in the throne room. Everyone was used to Xueqi being the boss. It wasn't that William wasn't good, it was just that there was a better and more perfect Xueqi, so why do they have to bow down to him? Moreover, the annihilation of the Horde was a big deal. No matter what, there should be a founder of the Alliance like Xueqi. Now that there was news of Xueqi, everyone was naturally reassured. "All right. We just have to do our own thing. Now, it's time to give Garrosh the last push." In Orgrimmar, Garrosh was about to go crazy. Having just destroyed Theramore, Garrosh felt that a small thing like the northern fortress wasn't worth his time, so he went back to Orgrimmar to oversee it. Who knew that as soon as he returned, he would receive an avalanche of emergency letters. "Great Chief, there are already as many as 300,000 people gathered outside Durotar, or even more. The civil officials can't even count them. What should we do? What should we do? How would I know what to do?" The brainless roared. He was reckless and brainless, but at least he had some common sense and knew that the people had to eat. Where would Orgrimmar get the food to feed 300,000 mouths? Chapter 1925. Bastards! The tribe's territory is being invaded, and they fled without fighting. Are they still great tribal warriors? Brainless Roar lost his temper. In a sense he was right. Adult female beast men were also brave warriors. Draka was also very good at fighting back then. But Great Chief, we've checked them. They are all pregnant or breastfeeding women, children less than 10 years old, and the elderly. Brainless Roar was speechless. According to the tribe's tradition, these people were not allowed to go to the battlefield. Otherwise, it would be blasphemy against the ancestors. But could he say the words of rejection? "Chief, many of them are from our war song tribe," a god whispered. Gurus felt extremely stifled. His raised arm finally lowered slowly. "Let them into Durota, but not Orgrimmar." In fact, this was a bit unnecessary. Everyone knew that Orgrimmar had no food. The key was to enter Durotar. A river of fury separated Durotar from the Barren Lands. After the cataclysm, the basin of the River of Fury formed to the west of Durotar, which was extremely rich in resources. The river washed down a large amount of fertile soil from upstream and deposited it in the basin. The plants here became lush, which indirectly led to more wild animals and magical beasts. However, the influx of refugees undoubtedly destroyed the ecological chain here, and all animals, big or small, were destroyed. The starving refugees did not care about the ecological chain. They were about to starve to death, so they slaughtered the animals here and ate them first. However, the collapse of the tribe continued. In just 3 days, the desolate land, Feralas, and Stoneclaw Mountain were declared to have fallen. Thunder Cliff was undefended. If the Alliance wanted to, they could completely destroy Thunder Cliff. In the primitive era of cold weapons, Thunder Cliff had excellent defense, but in the eyes of the Alliance's flying fleet, it was just a large target. The only reason why the fleet did not open fire was that the Alliance had issued a ban on cannons. For the first time, the Alliance sent out airborne troops without artillery support to fight against the Taurens under Magatha Grim Totem. The Silverhand Knights led by Gavin Rad, plus the Flying Sindorii Rangers with the support of wind elements, and Cudrin's Griffins, Thundercliff fell completely in just half a day. Even the Taurens hiding in the pillars of the Thundercliff were not spared. Magatha relied on the portal opened by the Sun King to barely escape. Brainless Roar was finally furious. He ordered the troops in the Barrenlands Great Rift Valley to defend the former Twilight Fortress. At the same time, he ordered the Sun King to launch a second round of destructive attacks. "I don't care what you do, blow up Naxxramas. I know that thing is definitely on the way to Kalimdor." Brainless Roar gave an unreasonable order. Anastrian almost wanted to slap his staff in Garush's ugly face. Was it so easy to blow up the Alliance's stronghold? The painful lesson from last time had already proved that directly teleporting in would not work. Even though he was a demigod, he could not deal with it. With the Alliance's tight defense, sending a cannon fodder with focusing rainbow in would only be a waste of a precious magic bomb. As a last resort, the Sun King gritted his teeth and sneaked in personally. It couldn't be helped. He was no longer a king, and he wasn't even the leader of any organization. He was just a traitor who had once betrayed the tribe. Even if he didn't want to go, Garush would force him to prove his loyalty to the tribe. Garush did not guess wrong. Naxxramas was indeed heading from the blasted land to Kalimdor. It was almost at the center of the endless sea. The Emerald Dream had worn away the remnants of Nazul's will, and even the power of the Crystal Skull had been mostly destroyed. Anastrian was no longer a demigod pharaoh. Now his strength had returned to Breaking Dawn. In exchange, he no longer had to suffer the mental torture of the Crystal Skull. He wanted to prove to the world that the Sun King was still powerful. In a bad situation, Garush did not fulfill his promise to help him take back the new Undercity. It was not that he did not want to, but that he could not. He knew that helping such a stupid chief might not end well. Since he had been stripped of the Sun Snatcher surname, his desire for power had grown. He used to be a king, and he could not accept that he would just leave the world stage in obscurity. Perhaps, this was his final struggle. Naxxramas' defense was very tight. Flying in the air, there were still 6 formations of more than 100 flying ships outside, from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, a total of 6 directions surrounding the fortress. This was not a problem for a Breaking Dawn wizard. There was no moon in the night. Under the cover of the night, he rode a bone griffin and easily approached the sky above Naxxramas. He wrapped himself in a cloud of black fog, and just like that with the wind, he slowly floated to the huge fortress with Feather Fall. Without much effort, he entered the fortress through a small open porthole. Normal people could not get in. He was a lich. Driven by the power of darkness, he could separate each of his bones, float them in mid-air, float them into the fortress one by one, and then reassemble them. The fortress was brightly lit, and people came and went. This was not a problem for Anastrian. He was very condescending to hide in one box after another, and let the logistics personnel transport them in. Without much effort, he read the minds of mortals and knew which box was sent into the core area of the fortress. However, he quickly realized that something was wrong. Not only was the surroundings too quiet, but 3 people with extremely strong elemental waves had suddenly appeared. Breaking dawn? No. There was even a demigod. Anastrian, don't you want to know where you've exposed yourself? The Sun King was shocked. How could he forget this voice? It was him, using the tone of a lofty victor, who had stripped him of his Sunstrider surname. The voice of Kale. That Sunstrider. It was over. The Sun King tried and was shocked to find that the entire space had been sealed. Left with no choice, he slowly walked out of the box and rearranged his shrunken bones according to the distribution of human bones. In the empty hall, the 3 Pharaoh Jaina, Khadgar, and Kale that stood there. This lineup was really magnificent. Hee, how did you find out? The Sun King deliberately used a teasing tone. What do you think? A charming voice that was not unfamiliar to Anastrian sounded behind him. His soul almost instantly collapsed. How could he not recognize this voice? The Eridar twins. It was because of their cooperation that he first betrayed Azeroth. Chapter 1926. Anastrian's soul trembled. At this moment, he finally understood why he had lost. Such a powerful high-tier demon lord was actually Duque's subordinate. When did you join Duque? He asked his last question, unwilling to give up. Guess. Gemini giggled. Her smile was like a flower, and it was as if she was watching the fruits she had planted ripened and could be harvested. It was a rather carefree feeling. Deep down, the sisters were still demons. It was just that the target they served was different. Having a master who bound them made them unhappy. Finding fun in their unhappiness, making someone who thought he was smart fall for his own cleverness and finally push himself into the abyss of despair was the greatest joy of this pair of female demons. Indignation. Indignation. Unwilling to leave the stage of history just like that, Anastrian roared and launched an attack. His target was Jaina. This was a very simple choice. He understood his son. Kale, that's cold gaze, had already told him that his son had cut all ties with him. He was not afraid of Kale, that's anger. He was angry because he still cared. There was no joy or sorrow. This was truly treating him as an enemy. After Kale, that's became a demigod, his strength was even more shocking. He was directly connected to the Land of Flames and could infinitely extract fire elements. Just standing there gave Anastrian a great sense of pressure. As for Karthika, he was a special existence at the core of the magic net. He was not to be trifled with. To him, his only chance was with this Ice Queen. Ice dragons roar. The atmosphere trembled. Ice elements poured out. Responding to the Sun King's call, a sea of ice elements broke through the void, passing through elemental channels that were not under the control of the magic net and arriving in this area. Once all the ice elements appeared, they formed a magnificent and domineering ice dragon head under his will. That dragon head was based on the former blue dragon queen, Syndagosa. She opened her icy mouth and spat out a bone-chilling dragon breath at Jaina. With the weave becoming extremely widespread, Anastrian was one of the rare archmages who took a different path. He had no choice but to do this. If he also relied on the weave, he would be no different from a skeleton soldier once he clashed with an existence with higher authority in the weave. Low efficiency but independence. Heh! Was it disdain? Was it admiration? Was it suspicion? Or arrogance? Other than Jaina herself, no one knew what the nasal laugh signified. The Sun King didn't know about Jaina's authority. Now he knew. Unfortunately, it was too late. As soon as it came out, it was a cold current of absolute zero. It wasn't as simple as covering the entire room. This vastness was enough to freeze the entire Naxxramas. Kaizi's long golden eyebrows twitched. From a demigod's point of view, this kind of elemental utilization was indeed inefficient and not aesthetically pleasing. However, Jaina was the person with the highest authority in the weave. She directly acted out the magical version of being rich and willful. Having more elements meant that she could do whatever she wanted. The other elemental channels were connected to the elemental world, or they could find a powerful elemental creature to sign a contract and borrow its power. Jaina, however, directly connected the elemental channel to the bottom of the tidal throne. What she drew was the world's purest frost element that obeyed her command. If the title Throne Master was someone else, he would probably have raged long ago. Who was the current leader of the water elemental world? Vashti. She had always considered herself a maid, but she was so close to Jaina that they could roll in the bed together with Xueqi. So what if it was a waste? I want to do whatever I want. When that unreasonable wave of frost element came crashing back, Anastrian finally realized that his era was over. Sigh. There was no anger, no resentment. There was only a sigh. Who would have thought that these would be his last words? Anastrian had dominated the northern continent for thousands of years, and was once hailed as a virtuous king. His last words were actually a sigh. The wave of frost element, which far exceeded what a breaking dawn mage could control, easily destroyed the Sun King's ice dragon breath, and completely froze the Sun King's body. The moment the frost covered Anastrian's body, the excessively pure elemental essence even attacked and ground at Anastrian's soul. Crack! A gust of wind blew past, and the great lich's body that had turned into an ice sculpture suddenly turned into ice dust, dissipating in the hall. A soul filled with a dark aura flew out at high speed. Unfortunately, this soul had just flown into the air when it was gently grabbed by a hand that reached out from the void. No matter how it dashed left and right, howled and twisted, it was unable to escape from that small space. For a moment, Kale, Thats and Khadgar bowed. The Eridar twins, who were standing in the corner of the hall to watch the show, knelt on the ground and lowered their once proud heads. Only Jaina's girlish heart was triggered. Almost like a hoof, she skipped over and shouted in pleasant surprise. Xueqi! Yes! It was Xueqi who had come. No one had expected Xueqi to rush back at this time. Liches were rather troublesome existences. If Xueqi had not made a move, it would have been up to the Eridar twins. With the twins' abilities, they were not afraid that the Sun King would escape, but some things were better left to Xueqi. Giving Jaina a one-handed hug, Xueqi did not even look at her. He looked at Kale. Thats. Is there anything else you want to say to him? If you find it hard to let go, the Alliance can announce to the public that he came to his senses at the last moment and was harmed by Gurus. This was a blatant falsification and a forced whitewash. Kale, Thats was very clear that as long as he accepted, Xueqi would help him settle the Windrunner family, and then make a huge reversal from top to bottom. For a moment, the excitement in his heart almost made him agree. After the excitement, what was left was a calm and indifferent heart. Phew! Letting out a long breath, Kale that smiled elegantly. Thank you for your concern, my lord. Actually, you have been very good to me. If it wasn't for you, I would probably have embarked on the tragic path of exile, or even fallen into evil. It was you who saved my soul, my subordinates, and my beloved people of Quelled Dorii. You don't have to do much. I believe that history will give my father a fair evaluation. That's all. He spoke calmly and slowly turned around, representing the relief and freedom of the former elf prince. Xueqi sighed softly and slowly closed his palm. A powerful evil spirit was annihilated in his hands.